Hello friends, this is Worm, and today we are going to be talking about all the exotics that you can obtain from the Monuments to Lost Lights. This is the exotic kiosk in the tower that allows you to obtain older exotics that don't have their quests anymore, don't have their associated ways of earning these weapons in-game. So all you have to do is go to the vendor with a certain amount of currencies and you can buy some of these weapons. But for a player that doesn't have a lot of insight, it might be tough to choose which weapon you want. So I've created a tier list based on my own personal experience with these weapons to talk about each one, talk about the strengths, the weaknesses, what they do. And like I said, put them on a tier list so that you can hopefully have some insight into how you want to spend your hard-earned exotic ciphers and ascendant shards and stuff like that. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the first tier, which of course is going to be the S tier category. Now, the weapons that I've classed in S tier here, I've put them here because they are absolutely some of the most potentially dangerous options in the game for a player to use. Like, they are top tier. They often have a permanent place in my loadout, or at least in my inventory. That way I can switch to these weapons to use them. They excel in multiple areas of the game, including, base level content all the way up to in-game content like Grandmasters, in raid, stuff like that. And they have very strong gameplay potential behind them. They often synergize well in a variety of builds, and they really don't hold the player back when you're using them. The first weapon that I have in this category is none other than Bad Juju. Now, Bad Juju is an exotic, it's a kinetic pulse rifle. It's a 450 lightweight frame, so it's 3-round burst, and it fires 450 rounds per minute. It is a very good option. Let's take a look at what the perks do. So the exotic perk is String of Curses. String of Curses states, kills refill the magazine, increase damage for a short duration, and grant super energy based on the strength of String of Curses. It also fires in full auto. Now, let's talk about that last part there, fires in full auto. This is a very nice addition. It does not fire like an auto rifle, okay? It's more like, it's a burst fire weapon that just fires automatically in burst. So when you hold the trigger down, it's going to send out those bursts without having to touch the trigger over and over again. But let's talk about String of Curses itself, because String of Curses here is doing a lot for us. First of all, it says kills refill the magazine. This is any kill you get with Bad Juju will refill it. Whether you have 5 stacks, 1 stack, 0 stacks, every kill you get with Bad Juju will refill the magazine completely. Not only that, but you're also getting increased damage for a short duration, and that damage increase is very high. It's 20% per stack, and again, it stacks up to 5 times, so you can get up to 100% more damage on Bad Juju, and it grants super energy based on the strength of String of Curses. Sorry, the super energy gains, I believe, are like 5% at 5 times stacks, 5% additional super energy, which may not sound like a lot on paper, but that's a lot of super energy. Like, that means that you only need 20 kills from a absolutely flat super bar. You only need 20 kills at times 5 stacks to get a super back. And if you've been playing for even like a couple of weeks in Destiny 2, you know there are several encounters where you have a lot of really trash tier enemies that you can cut through like butter. This is not including also the damage that you actually deal, giving you, super energy. This is not including the base amount of super energy you get. This is just an additional 5% on top of all of that, which is an incredible power behind this weapon. Now, it also has the perk Hipfire Grip. This is a standard weapon perk. It increases accuracy, stability, and precision hit targeting when firing from the hip. Really not that big of a deal. I would not recommend walking out and hip firing this weapon. It's not going to perform very well if you do that. But it's there, just kind of an ode to Destiny 1 and the way that the weapon was designed in Destiny 1. The strengths of this weapon, first of all, it recently received a buff. It received a tremendous buff at that. The buff consisted of increasing its magazine size to 36 rounds and increasing the duration of String of Curses. Now, Bad Juju used to have a 24-round magazine, which means you could comfortably shoot 6 bursts before you had to reload, which is one of the biggest things that held the weapon back. Because why would you want to use a pulse rifle that has 6 shots in it? Like, that's like using a hand cannon that only has 6 bullets. That's like using a scout rifle that only has 6 bullets. That's like using an auto rifle that only has like 15 bullets. It was absolutely terrible, and it did not feel good to use, but they increased it to a 36-round magazine, which is tremendous. Now you have a comfortable 12 bursts that you can get out, which is fantastic. They also increase String of Curses. Again, I think now it lasts, if I'm not mistaken, 7.5 seconds, maybe 8.5 seconds with the Catalyst, and we'll talk about the Catalyst here in just a second. So again, these are very good buffs. They make the weapon feel very good. It's got great ad clear potential. Again, it's reloading after every kill, so you will never have to reload this so long as you can get a kill before your magazine runs completely out. And you're doing 100% more damage at times 5 stacks. I mean, even at times 1 stack, that's 20% more damage. Times 2 is 40, so on and so forth, till you get to 100% more damage, which is just crazy. That's actually one of the highest damage boosts on a weapon perk in the game. And then of course you have the super gains. You can get supers back incredibly fast. Maybe you've seen some, media videos of people getting their super back in like 15 seconds with bad Juju. That is all straight up due to String of Curses, which is a really great perk. Now, this weapon does have a weakness, in my opinion. Primary weakness is that it will struggle against high health targets, even with the magazine change, even with the String of Curses duration. Like if you're just trying to pick down a high health target, that might present some challenge because you might get all 12 bursts off and not quite kill that target. Then you have to do the reload, which the reload isn't horrible on bad Juju, but you might have to do the reload. It's something that can be circumvented if you've got, a bunch of ads there. You kill 5 red bars, get 5 times stacks, start shooting a orange bar, yellow bar, something like that. Then before you run out of ammo, switch back, shoot another red bar to reload the magazine. You can have workarounds with this, but really pulse rifles never have been that strong against high health targets. Bad Juju is kind of in that same boat. Now, like we said, Bad Juju does have a Catalyst. The Catalyst actually increases the String of Curses duration. So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the base level String of Curses lasts 5.5 seconds, and with the Catalyst it lasts 7.5 seconds. Now it might be 8.5. I can't really remember the exact number. But Bad Juju is an S tier option. It fits into any build because no matter what subclass you're using, having the ability to get your super faster is always a good thing. Whether it's a defensive super like Ward of Dawn, or an offensive super like maybe Dawn Blade or something like that. It's always nice to have additional super energy coming in to feed your super so that you can get the benefits from using your super, your damage resistance, your high damage output. Bad Juju is a great option. Plus it just has so much in its kit. It's automatic reload, it's damage boost. It's a great weapon. But yeah, that's Bad Juju. Let's go ahead and move on, talk about the next weapon, which is Lumina. Now I know there's probably a vet watching this video thinking, oh my god, Worm, how can you put Lumina in S tier? And we're going to talk about how I can put Lumina in S tier, because I do believe that Lumina is truly an S tier exotic. Now it's a kinetic hand cannon, and it comes with the perk Noble Rounds. Kills with this weapon leave behind remnants. Absorbing a remnant converts your next hip-fired shot into an ally-seeking Noble Round and partially refills the magazine. Now, Noble Rounds ties into the next perk, which is called Blessing of the Sky, very nicely. Blessing of the Sky states, using a Noble Round on an ally heals them and grants both you and them a weapon damage bonus for a short duration. Now, the healing that it gives, when you shoot an ally, I believe it gives that ally 75 HP just instantly. So it doesn't, it's not like you shoot them and they start health regeneration. Like, they get 75 HP and they start health regeneration. Okay, and that health regeneration is an unstunnable health regeneration. It's not a restoration bonus, it's just a healing effect. But it will start their health regeneration and give them that big chunk of health. So naturally, this lends itself to a support weapon. But really, where this weapon truly shines is in the second part of Blessing of the Sky. It grants both you and your ally a weapon damage bonus for a short duration. Now, that damage bonus is 35% in PvE, which is incredibly high. That is the second highest PvP output buff in the game, and it lasts for 10 seconds. So obviously, like we said, the strengths, it's got very strong support capabilities, which is a very niche playstyle for some people. Me personally, I love playing support. I think that every fire team should have at least one person that plays supports. Lumina is an option that any class can put on and use to keep your allies alive, keep your damage high. It's a very strong support weapon. It also, like I said, it does have a very high damage output buff. And I want to talk about that output buff right now for just a second. This is the second highest in the game. First highest in the game is Sentinel Shield. When you are standing behind a Titan Sentinel Shield, you get 40% output buff. And the reason why I say output buff is because some people will say, well, what about Tractor Cannon? Tractor Cannon also allows you to deal 35% more damage, but Tractor Cannon is a debuff, not a buff. Okay, so what that means is Destiny 2, basically there's buffs and debuffs. You can have one debuff and one buff applied at a time. You can't stack things, so you can't stack Radiance and Blessing of the Sky, stuff like that. But it always goes with your highest buff and your highest debuff against the target. So, hypothetically speaking, you could have a teammate use Tractor Cannon to debuff a boss, so they take 35% more damage. Then you buff your teammates with Lumina here to make their damage increase by 35%, and you're looking at a massive damage boost against a target. But Lumina is, like I said, it's the second highest of the game, and its ease of use is incredible. The ability to collect noble rounds, very easy. I probably should have mentioned that. When you get a kill, basically it leaves a little bubble above the enemy's like death location, and once you get close to it, you don't have to walk right into it, but once you get close to it, it will start to track towards you, and then you will collect it, and it will give you one of those noble rounds. But when you shoot your ally with that noble round, you can just continuously get kills. And as long as you're getting kills, you'll make those remnants. Those remnants will start coming towards you as long as you get close enough, and they'll give you noble rounds. You can have a maximum of 6 noble rounds as well. So basically, you can have pretty much a flat 35% damage boost at all times during any given activity with this weapon, which is amazing. Another strength that it has is the auto reloading capability. When you pick up a remnant, it will reload 4 rounds into the magazine, which is a nice little benefit, especially because it's a hand cannon. Against red bars, exotics deal 40% more damage flat anyways. So you're going to be one-shotting, maybe two-shotting most red bars. So your remnants that you're collecting are coming back to you, and they're filling your weapon up. Just a very nice aspect of it. And of course, it does have solar synergy. If you're using a solar subclass and you have on Ember of Benevolence, which is one of the fragments, Lumina will activate Ember Benevolence through its healing and its buffing capabilities. So that's always nice. It's always nice to get your abilities back even faster, and Lumina does do that. But Lumina does have one huge weakness, and that is the fact that there is no solo playability with the weapon. This weapon, like we said, it's all about healing and buffing your allies. So if you are in an activity where you are the only guardian around, Lumina is going to do nothing for you other than have that auto reload feature, which is nice, but it's really not necessary. Reloads aren't too bad, and there are just better options. You could use something like Thorn, which would be a better option for solo gameplay, which we'll talk about Thorn a little bit later. But yeah, that's its primary weakness. But other than that, if you're doing any activities, which Destiny again is an online game, so even if you load into strikes, like you're gonna have random blueberries teammates, those count as allies, so you can shoot them and heal them. So yeah, that's Lumina. It does have a catalyst. The catalyst will actually allow it to create 2 remnants per kill. So instead of just 1, you're getting 2, which means that when you pick those up, you're now getting 8 rounds back in the magazine, and you're getting 2 of those, those healing shots off. Lumina, like I said, it is a very, very strong weapon. Even if you're not playing a support build, it's a phenomenal option because of that damage buff that you can give yourself and your teammates. So yeah, that's Lumina. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one, which is Quicksilver Storm. Quicksilver Storm is a kinetic auto rifle, and I know somebody's watching, oh no, it's not kinetic, it's strand. We'll get to that in just a second. But Quicksilver Storm is a kinetic auto rifle, and Quicksilver Storm is one of the best weapons in the game. The S tier, this list, I haven't tiered it by, the overall, like, best to worst in S tier. Like, all these are pretty equal on the, they're pretty much on the same level. But Quicksilver Storm might be, like, the very, very top. Let's talk about its perks. Here. Rocket Tracers. Landing a multiple hits turns your next shot into a homing micro rocket. Then it has Grenade Chaser. Landing multiple rockets loads a grenade. Use your alternate weapon action, which is basically just your reload button, to switch into grenade launcher mode. So, the way this weapon works is as you're shooting, every 14th, I believe it's 14th bullet that lands will automatically fire a homing micro rocket towards your enemy. Then, once 3 of those, every time a micro rocket hits, or every 3 micro rockets that hits will load a grenade launcher bullet. Then when you click and hold your reload button, you literally like will transition the weapon, that little foregrip you see in the picture there. You'll grab that and you'll be able to shoot a grenade launcher grenade that has comparable damage out. And it's really, really strong. What makes it so strong? This weapon is great in all levels of content because of its multiple purpose against enemies. It's an auto rifle. It's a 720 auto rifle. I should probably add that in there. It's a 720 auto rifle. So already against minor enemies, your red bars, it's doing wonders. Then it's got the homing micro rockets, which just increase its damage. I believe the homing micro rockets deal basically the equivalent of like 3 or 4 crit shots. So you're just increasing your damage flat out. But then when you have grenade chasers and you have the grenade launcher ability, they deal a lot of damage, and it's a very unique like fire animation, because unlike a breech loaded grenade launcher where you shoot one, you have to reload it. All you do is pump that little foregrip down there. So you can shoot a grenade, pump the foregrip, shoot a grenade, pump the foregrip. You can hold a maximum of 3 grenades. So against mini bosses and champions, stuff like that, it also does really, really strong damage. But the other thing that makes it incredible is the fact that it's so easy to use. Literally, you put it on and you just, ignoring the grenade chaser, you're already getting increased damage because the rocket tracers they just work for you. They just work in the background passively. You don't really have to think of anything, think about anything when you're using this weapon. And then you can switch to the grenade launcher mode whenever you're ready. Use it, and it's an easy weapon to use. Like I love how easy this weapon is to use and how strong it really is on the battlefield. It also has a pretty decent reload speed. So one of the things that a lot of people like to bring up is the fact that, oh, it doesn't have a reload perk. You don't need one. The reload is already pretty good at base. The only weakness I could really think of for this weapon was the fact that building up stacks of grenade chasers can take a bit of time. Whenever you're shooting the weapon, you're getting basically one grenade back per magazine, which, I mean, that's kind of slow. It's not really holding you back at all because, again, you're kind of saving those grenades for higher health targets, which are not like everywhere on the battlefield. But that's about the only weakness this weapon has. Like it is incredible. Now, I want to talk about the catalyst, because just a second ago we talked about strand damage type. The catalyst for this weapon is a very unique catalyst, because what it does is it changes the weapon's damage type from kinetic to strand. Now, that's a big deal for a couple reasons. Number one, obviously, if it's a strand weapon, it can deal, it can kind of intertwine with strand. For example, the unraveling rounds will work with this, which I think is pretty awesome. But one of the things about elemental damage types, so strand, stasis, void, solar, arc, they deal a flat 5% less damage than kinetics. So if you slot this catalyst in, you're going to deal 5% less damage with the weapon, but it will become strand, so you'll have the ability to use unraveling rounds. And the second part of the catalyst, final blows with the grenades from this weapon create tangles. So again, if you love strand, I would 100% recommend putting this catalyst on, because the catalyst is it's great because the fact that it builds into strand. Now, the tangles, just to point out here, they are under the same rule set that normal tangles are. You can't get 5 kills with a grenade and spawn 5 tangles. Like, you can only spawn 1 tangle every 13 seconds. So that's something that, just keep that in mind. Don't expect to be getting just hundreds and hundreds of tangles on the battlefield. Still under the same rule set, but this weapon is incredible. And like I said, if you're building into strand, it can be even better. But even if you're not, even if you're using void, arc, solar, something like that, just keep the kinetic version, and it's going to be doing a ton of damage. Very easy weapon and a very fun weapon to use. Let's move on to the next weapon, Witherhoard. And Witherhoard, I think that anybody who's watching this who knows about Destiny 2 will agree that Witherhoard is an S tier option. This is a kinetic breach loaded grenade launcher, meaning that it is special ammo. And that's important because most grenade launchers are heavy ammo, but this one's not. This one is a special ammo weapon. Let's talk about it. Comes with the perk Primeval's Torment. Projectiles fired by this weapon blight the target or nearby area on impact. And it has Break the Bank. Blighted targets take damage over time and blight the nearby area on death. So this weapon, when you shoot it, it shoots like a very slow firing, a very slow traveling bubble. And when that bubble hits the ground, it will explode into a pool on the area that lasts for, I believe, 5 seconds. And anything that walks into that pool on the ground just starts taking damage. And it's a lot of damage, and it takes damage very quickly. This means that you could theoretically put this down in like a doorway, for example, and let enemies walk into it, and they burn and take damage and stuff. And if they don't die, they walk out of it, and they're weak. Very good. But also, you can stick the grenade to a target, and when you stick it to a target, it will actually blight that target and make it take damage over time for 10 seconds instead of just 5. Then, of course, if it dies, it will then drop that blight onto the ground so that other nearby enemies start taking damage. This is a very, very versatile weapon. Like, this weapon it's got area denial, it's got damage output, it's got passive damage. Like, it is a very, very good weapon to have on the battlefield. And there's not really a lot of situations where this wouldn't be something that you would want to use. It has high damage. It's very easy to use. There's no, oh, I have to consider this exotic perk or this exotic perk. You just point and shoot. That's all you do. And it just works. And of course, like we said, it has that area denial. You can put it in a doorway where enemies are spawning. Or, if you know that you're going to get flanked by an enemy that's going to come from behind you, just shoot on the ground behind you. And as they walk in, they start taking damage and stuff. Like, it is truly one of the best options. This was actually the weapon that I mained for almost a year after its launch with Season of Arrivals. It's an amazing weapon, but it does have some downsides. Primary downsides, it has a very slow reload without the catalyst, and we'll talk about the catalyst in just a second, but it has a very slow reload, and the velocity is absolutely terrible. Okay, I'm pretty sure it has a velocity modifier that makes it travel slower than any other grenade launcher. So this is not something you're going to be able to use from like miles away and shoot it at enemies. Like, you can arch it, give it a nice arc so it flies up, comes down, but it's difficult to use like that. It's something you're going to want to stay medium to close range with, because that bubble, as you shoot it, it goes very, very slowly through the air. But those are the only weaknesses of this weapon. And really, these are not something I would concern myself too much with, because especially that first one there, the slow reload, is fixed by the catalyst. So the catalyst will increase the handling, but it also gives it auto-loading holster, which states that holstering this weapon automatically reloads it after a short period of time. This is so good because you shoot it on the ground or at an enemy, switch to your other weapons, deal damage, kill stuff, blah, 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 and it will passively reload in the background, which basically just immediately removes one of the weaknesses, which is that reload speed. This weapon is fantastic. I really cannot stress that enough. But yeah, let's move on to the next weapon, which is Rat King. And I know for a fact that there's going to be people who disagree with this, but I will die on this hill. Rat King is a kinetic 300 round per minute sidearm, and it is an absolute monster. Let's talk about what it does. First perk here is Rat Pack. This fully automatic weapon becomes stronger when nearby allies also have it equipped. Stacks up to 6 times. This perk is, if you have other people using Rat King, like y'all will you'll get a damage or a fire rate increase, which is really good, especially because if you have 6, like, you're firing it 450 rounds per minute or something crazy like that. Like, it gets really crazy how fast you can shoot and how much damage you can put out, because sidearms do have very, very high DPS. Even though it's small amounts, it is still high DPS. Its second perk is Vermin, and this is really where, in my opinion, the weapon is made. Okay, like that first perk, Rat Pack, that's a nice convenience. It's cool when other people use it, but that's not where its strength is. Its strength is in Vermin, which states that reloading immediately after a kill grants a brief period of invisibility, void invisibility, mind you, as well as the catalyst. The catalyst does a couple things. Number one, it improves aim assistance and recoil direction. That's really nice. It's convenient for the Crucible, especially. But where this weapon is really strong at is in the second part of that catalyst. It refreshes health on Vermin invisibility trigger. So you get a kill, and as long as you have the catalyst, you reload and you turn invisible, and you start your health regeneration. That is amazing. Okay, so it grants several positive buffs. Invisibility is always strong. That literally just causes enemies just to not shoot at you anymore. And as long as you know how to play invisibility properly, like, it's absolutely fantastic in both PvE and PvP. And I use this weapon religiously in PvP. If you've been following the channel, you probably know that, but you also do get that health regeneration. Now, the one thing to note about that health regeneration, it is something that can be stunned. So if you get a kill and you start reloading the Rat King and you take damage, it will stop that health regeneration. But the other strengths of this weapon, it allows you to reset after each engagement. One of the reasons why I like using this weapon so much inside the Crucible is because after you get done with the fights, even if you have tier 10 recovery, you are kind of at a risk, right? You're kind of at a risk because you have to take a little bit of time to heal, you know, be out of combat for just a little bit with Rat King. You don't do that. You get a kill, you go invis, which takes you, or which hides you from the radar. Then you also get health regeneration. Like I can chain together easily like 6-7 kills at a time with this weapon. It is so good. And it also does have that void synergy because it has void invisibility. So if you have Graviton Forfeit, for example, you will get you'll get a faster melee cooldown. If you have Gear Falcon's Hauberk, you'll get what is it called? Volatile Round. Sorry, I couldn't think of the name for a second. It has void synergy, which is really, really nice. Now, it does have some weaknesses here. One of those, it's a close range weapon, so in PvE activities, maybe Grandmasters, you're going to want to be careful when using it. But the other thing is that the Catalyst really is a must-have. If you don't have the Catalyst, I wouldn't recommend using this weapon. And the unfortunate thing is, when you get, like, you won't have the Catalyst when you first buy the weapon. So you buy the weapon, then you have to wait until the Catalyst drops in Strikes or Crucible games or Gambit matches, any of those, and it'll have a random chance to drop. But once you do get it and you unlock the Catalyst, this thing is an absolute monster in both PvE and PvP. And really it shines in PvP the most. But yeah, Rat King is possibly one of my favorite weapons in the game. But yeah, let's move on to the next one. Dragon's Breath. This thing is nuts. And if you've been around for any amount of time, you know that. It is a solar rocket launcher, and it comes with the perks Composite Propellant. Rockets embed themselves in struck targets and periodically eject incendiary fuel that inflicts scorch. The longer this weapon goes without firing, the more fuel the next rocket contains. It has the other perk, High Octane. Igniting nearby targets partially replenishes fuel. This weapon refills itself from reserves upon gaining maximum fuel. So this weapon is so cool. They really made it so much better than it was back in D1. Basically, when you shoot the rockets, first of all, and this is not mentioned in the perks here, as it travels, it is pouring fire out on the ground behind it. So when you shoot it, it's going to leave a trail of fire until a rocket hits something. Then when the rocket hits something, it's going to be spitting out these chunks of magma, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, these chunks of propellant that are burning enemies around it, scorching enemies around it. And of course, like I said, in the, where is it? Yeah. In the High Octane part, you can ignite targets, which is a solar synergizing thing, and ignitions deal a ton of damage. This thing is amazing passive damage. You put it on, you shoot a target, then you switch to your special sniper, whatever you want to use, and continue damaging the target while Dragon's Breath is just working in the background for you for free. Then, after a short amount of time, it will automatically refill itself because it's causing ignitions and stuff, and so you just pull it out, shoot it again. Like, it's amazing. The strengths, it has, like we said, very, very high damage. Multiple ignitions that's a lot. That is a lot of damage, plus the scorch on top of it. It is very high damage. It's also easy to use. Like I said, you shoot it, and that's it. Okay, you shoot it at a boss, or you shoot it at ads. You shoot it, and you just put it up, let it do its thing, and it'll automatically reload over time. So it's very easy to use. It also has that passive damage, like we just talked about. You shoot it at a boss, switch to your other weapons, deal damage. Or, if you have to take care of ads, shoot at a boss and clear ads. Passive damage, just like with Witherhoard, always a good thing. And of course, it does have solar synergy because it applies scorch and ignitions, meaning that if you have Ember of, Ember of Char, I believe, Ember of Char, your ignitions will deal increased damage over an increased radius of effect. They'll scorch targets depending on your fragment stuff. This weapon is very deserving of an S tier spot. Does have some weaknesses. Primary weakness, it can kill the user. This is something that's people discovered very, very quickly when Dragon's Breath launched, I believe it was last season, or not, or the last season of Destiny, season of the Wish. But yeah, it can kill the user. If you shoot it and you walk near that rocket, you will instantly die. This is not something you want to use at close range. You definitely want to be back a little bit from the battle, because as it's spitting out those little things, they'll kill you. So just keep that in mind when using it. Stay at a good distance. Does have a catalyst. Catalyst, of course, it says that this weapon replenishes its fuel faster. So basically it has that auto loading effect faster, and defeating targets with this weapon cause them to periodically drop fire sprites. It says periodically. I'm pretty sure that every kill you get with Dragon's Breath will create fire sprites. So if you shoot it into a group of like 20 enemies, there's going to be 20 fire sprites. And of course, fire sprites grant you grenade energy when you pick them up. I think it's like 5%. So considering that, you can kill 20 enemies, that's an instant free grenade. So Dragon's Breath, very, very good weapon. It is an incredible heavy weapon. But I think, yeah, that's it for the S tier. Now I want to move on, talk about the A tier weapons. Now these weapons, they're still top tier, but they typically have like maybe some more nicheness to them. Like they're not just as versatile as the other ones. They are always a strong and safe option to choose when going into any content and will serve the player well on the battlefield. But they often have strong synergy with subclasses and will not hold the player back too much when you use them. Basically, these are good. These are solid weapons. These are weapons that you can pick, that you will still feel good about using them, even though they might have a little bit more specific scenario usage. It's still pretty general use. Let's talk about the first one, which is Sleeper Simulant. This is a solar linear fusion rifle, so it's a heavy weapon. This thing, I just want to say, this thing is incredible. This thing is, it looks amazing. But let's talk about its exotic perks here. Its first perk, or actually its only exotic perk, is Dornrushen. I hope I said that right. Which states, this weapon's laser over-penetrates enemies and refracts off hard surfaces. It also has moving targets, which states its increased movement speed and target acquisition when moving while aiming down the sights. This perk basically gives it +10 just free target acquisition. But let's talk about Dornrushen for just a second. Laser over penetrates targets. So when you're shooting it at enemies, that laser will go through them if they're lower level enemies. Okay, if they're like red bars, orange bars, that laser will literally just fire right through them. It will probably kill them too, because this thing deals a ton of damage. But hard surfaces includes, the floor, the ceiling, cover that's on the battlefield, but also if it hits bosses, and I think mini bosses, maybe champions too. When it hits those, it refracts into 5 smaller lasers. So it shoots one, and then it hits, the ground. For example, you shoot it at the ground, it'll bounce off into 5 other lasers that will keep going, and those 5 lasers deal the same amount of damage that the initial laser did. So it's not like it's breaking that first shot down into 5 different damage instances. No, it's literally quintupling, I guess, the damage of this laser, which is really cool. The strengths, it's like we said, it's very hard hitting. Like this thing smacks enemies. It's a linear fusion rifle, but it is it's not like other legendary linear fusion rifles. This thing hits way, way harder than other linear fusion rifles. It is very ammo efficient, and I know this is, I guess, kind of a debatable topic, but you can hold, if I'm not mistaken, you can hold, I think 7 or 8 shots at base, which is plenty more than enough. Plus, if you have the catalyst, it increases that even more. We'll talk about the catalyst again in just a second. So it's very ammo efficient, and this is easy to use. You literally don't have to think about anything. You don't have to think about, like with Dragon's Breath was last one we talked about, it's like, okay, well, I have to make sure that I have, given enough time to auto reload and blah, blah, like this. No, you just pull it out when you need it and use it. Very easy to use, very fun weapon. But it does have some weaknesses. Primary weakness, this is a linear fusion rifle, so critical hits are required to keep its damage up. And Bungie made a change a couple, or actually several months ago, where the body shot damage of this deals more damage. It deals more damage, so you don't have to hit crits, but you still have to. You still have to hit crits. I mean, come on, if you're not hitting a crit, you're losing 30% of its overall damage, which is an insanely high amount of damage. Another downside. This is a weapon that can kill you when that's laser ricochets. If you're standing right in front of a wall and you shoot that wall, that laser can bounce back and kill you. Now, when are you standing right in front of a wall? Oh, here, I'm sorry. I need to also change. Let me just change this down real quick. We're on, there we go. We're on that tier. Sorry. But whenever you are using, like, I don't think anybody's gonna be standing there looking at a wall and trying to kill themselves. It's happened twice to me in Destiny 2, where I have been shooting at a boss and I get killed by the laser ricochet. And at first I did not believe it. I was like, how did I die? But I was able to record it, go back and watch it. And sure enough, the reason I died was because I got ricocheted by one of these lasers. But that's so uncommon. I really wouldn't say this should deter you from using this weapon. Now the last weakness, Catalyst really is strongly encouraged. The Catalyst down here gives it minus 250 charge time. So it charges faster, which means it shoots basically faster, and it gives you increased ammo reserve. I say it's strongly encouraged because if you don't have the Catalyst, it's still going to be a good option. It's still going to be, you know, a very high damage weapon. But if you have the Catalyst, it makes it just all that better. And most people would encourage you to go get the Catalyst. And I think that's one of the things we're going to see over the next couple of weapons is, you know, having the Catalyst. But that's Sleeper Simulant. It is a very fun, very good option. Moving on to the next one, we got Polaris Lance. This is a solar scout rifle. Comes with the perks. The perfect fifth. Precision hits return ammo to the mag. Landing 4 precision hits loads a delayed solar explosive round that scorches targets on the next shot. It also has Zen Moment. This is not an exotic perk. This is on other legendaries. But Zen Moments says causing damage with this weapon reduces recoil and flinch over time. Let's talk about the perfect fifth. As you land precision shots, it's automatically reloading. Like every time you hit a precision shot, it just gives you 1 round back in the magazine, which means if you can only hit precision shots, you'll never have to reload this weapon. Also, landing 4 precision hits causes the 5th shot, the next shot, to have a solar explosion that scorches on the next, you know, on the next shot. So it does have that solar synergy. This weapon has high damage. Why does it have high damage? Because it synergizes with solar, which means it can cause ignitions, which means this is dealing way more damage than an average scout rifle. It's a scout rifle, so it's very long range. So you can use this very safely from a distance. Like if you've got, you know, I know that there was a Nightfall not too terribly long ago where everybody was using Polaris Lance because you could sit at a safe distance and deal a ton of damage to the boss. Very good. It has that solar synergy because it scorches. So, you know, again, you can build into some of those solar fragments and stuff. Very good, but it does have some weaknesses. The primary weakness it has, and if you get this weapon and you use it, you'll find out very, very quickly, it does not fare well in close ranges. Scout rifles, in general, I would say aren't necessarily like close range options. I think that's pretty common sense. This weapon, though, given its zoom and the fact that it's a 150 scout rifle, it really suffers in close ranges. Like if you're going to use this weapon, I would recommend almost running double primary so that you can have an auto rifle, an SMG, a sidearm, or something to pair with it. Because I think Destiny has moved to most encounters being pretty close to medium range. There's only a few instances where long range is still a thing, or it still is, you know, available to do. But also it does require critical damage. If you don't hit precision shots, or if you're slow at hitting precision shots, this weapon is not going to do very well because you're not getting the ammo, you're not getting the scorching. Like it's literally just a scout rifle if you're just hitting body shots. But yeah, that's Polaris Lance. It does have a catalyst. The catalyst, very simple. It gives it the perk Dragonfly, which states that precision kills will grant an elemental explosion. It's a great addition. You know, it just kicks the weapon up just a little bit more. Moving on, though, we have Ace of Spades, which is a kinetic 140 round per hand cannon. And this is a classic. Comes with the perk Memento Mori. Reloading after a kill loads this magazine with a few extra damage bullets, 6 of them to be exact. It also grants radar while aiming down sights. Then it has an exotic perk, Firefly. And I highlighted Firefly yellow here because Firefly on Ace of Spades actually has a very unique icon. But Firefly is a perk that is available on other legendary weapons. Firefly states precision kills with this weapon increase reload speed and cause the target to explode, dealing solar damage to nearby enemies. The strings. This is a very versatile weapon. Of course, it has ad clear because Firefly. It has faster reload because of Firefly. It has, you know, high health target damage because Memento Mori, giving those bullets, I want to say double damage, right? I think it's double damage. It might be a little bit more than double damage. In PvE, you keep your radar when you aim it outside. It's just a good all-arounder. This is also a fantastic weapon in PvP. because of its high stats, which you can see there. Like it has, I want to say like 80 range, 85 range at base, which is a crazy amount of range on a hand cannon, a 140 hand cannon. So very good in PvP. And of course it has the style factor. I mean, the lore behind it is fantastic, and whose gun it was, stuff like that. But also it's a good weapon. It's got some really awesome ornaments too. The weaknesses of this weapon, though, it will struggle against high health targets. And I know we said it has a versatile kit, it can handle high health targets. When I'm talking about high health targets here, I'm talking about like champions and stuff. Like this is not going to be a champion eater. You know, it's just not. It also doesn't have subclass synergy, despite precision or despite Firefly stating that it deals solar explosive damage. It does not have subclass synergy. So again, just there's something to keep in mind. But it does have a catalyst. Catalyst states that Firefly deals more damage while Memento Mori is active. This again just adds to the ad clear potential of it. Again, this is a solid all-around weapon. It's a very fun gun to use. It sounds amazing. That's another style factor. It sounds absolutely fantastic. And especially once you get Memento Mori active, it sounds really cool. But that's Ace of Spades. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple gun, but it does the job. Moving on, we have Monarque. This is a void combat bow, and this is possibly my favorite exotic bow in the game. Comes with the perk Poison Arrows. Arrows fired quickly after a full draw become poison arrows. Precision hits with poison arrows stun the combatant and spread poison to nearby ones. It is also strong against overload champions. Then it comes with perk Snapshot Sights, which is just a legendary perk. Basically, when you have this weapon on, you fully draw the bow and you get a perfect draw, which, you know, with bows, that window's like, I think half a second or something like that. It's not hard once you learn how it works. But once you deal a perfect draw, you let off the trigger and it will poison the target that you hit, which is really fun. It also, if you hit a precision shot, it will cause a poison cloud explosion that poisons enemies around that enemy. This is a very simple, straightforward weapon. It essentially deals double damage due to the poison effect. Like in PvE, not in PvP. PvP is not that much, but in PvE, it's going to deal double damage. It's got that ad clear. It's got that ease of use. Literally, it's just a bow you just got to hit precision shots with. It, like I said here, it has high ad clear potential. And of course, this is the first weapon on our list that has built-in anti-champion capability, which is Overload. So if you are in a Grandmaster or a Nightfall, or, you know, Garden of Salvations, for example, you can draw this bow, shoot it, and your Overload will be instantly stunned, which is always nice. But it does have some weaknesses here. Primary weakness here, bows have draw time. This is going to be the same thing with basically any bow. There's slow weapons to use. Even though it has Snapshot and it feels snappy, that draw time is just, in a fast-paced environment, it can prove to be fatal. Now, Monarque does have some things working for it. We'll talk about in just a second. But also close range engagements can be difficult. If you're in a situation where enemies are spawning, you know, 10 meters away from you, if your aim is not really good, and if you're not quick on your feet with it, you're probably you're going to struggle. And again, both of these things are just bows in general. But it does have a catalyst. The catalyst gives it Unrelenting, which states rapidly defeating targets triggers health regeneration. Guardians and more powerful combatants count as more than one kill. This builds into the weapon nicely. Again, it has that really high ad clear potential. So as you're getting, you know, an arrow off that kills 2 or 3 ads, you're starting health regeneration. It's fantastic. Monarque, very simple weapon to use, very straightforward, but it is a very fun and a very, very solid option. Moving on, we have Leviathan's Breath, which is a void heavy bow, okay? Which is a very unique weapon because this is the only heavy bow in the game. Comes with a perk. Big Game Hunter fires a massive heavy bolt that stuns unshielded combatants. It is strong against unstoppable champions. It also has the perk Leviathan's Sigh. When fully drawn, the bolt creates a large concussive blast that knocks combatants back and makes them volatile. So this is the second weapon that we have on this list with anti-champion capability. This one is for unstoppables. This is a really cool bow because whenever you fully draw the bolt, which it has a very long draw time, like a very long draw time, it's like a second, like 1.2 seconds or something crazy to draw this weapon back. But once you draw it and let it loose, it deals a massive amount of damage. because it does two things. Number one, like it deals a lot of damage that first hit, but it also creates that concussive blast that deals, I want to say, just like almost the same damage that the initial hit has. So it is very strong. This is one of the best. This is A tier for primarily the fact that it has very high, very consistent damage output. Any damage scenario where you have to deal precision damage against, you know, any raid boss, strike boss, anything like that, and you can consistently hit your crits, this is going to be a great option. It's not the highest DPS, but it is very good DPS. It's very consistent, and of course, because it's a bow, it has that higher aim assistance, so it's easier to hit those crits. Of course, it does have built-in anti-champion through Unstoppable, but it has void synergy because that Leviathan side on there. You can make enemies volatile. So this, if you're using it with, say, Gear Falcon's Hauberk on Hunter, will turn you invisible as you're getting kills with it and stuff. So that's very nice. And then one of the best parts about this weapon is the fact that when you're using it, you'd have no need for reserve mods. And the reason why is because of the catalyst, and we'll talk more about that in just a second. The weaknesses, of course, is the very slow draw out time. We talked about that just a second ago. It takes forever to draw this thing. And with that being said, the catalyst is also a must because the catalyst grants it Archer's tempo. Archer's tempo decreases the draw time after every precision hit. Without the catalyst, I would say this weapon is not worth it in terms of DPS. I would say that probably Sleeper is just a better option. But if you do have the catalyst, it makes it much better to use. The catalyst also maximizes quiver size, okay? And like we said up here in the strengths, there's no need for reserve mods because when you have the catalyst, you max out your ammo. So you don't have to put, you know, build into void reserves. You can use kinetic reserves or, you know, arc reserves, or if you want to do damage resistance mods or armor charge mods, you can use those and not worry about missing out on ammo for this weapon, which I think is a really nice, like just a nice thing to have on this weapon. This is a super powerful bow, very good at what it does, and yeah, that's Leviathan's Breath. Let's talk about the next one. We've got Traveler's Chosen, which is a kinetic 300 round per minute sidearm. Traveler's Chosen comes with perk Gathering Light. Final blows with this weapon grant stacks of Gathering Light. Use your alternate weapon action, so click and hold your reload button to consume stacks, granting melee, grenade, and class ability energy based on the number of stacks. Gift of the Traveler, each stack of Gathering Lights improves this weapon's reload, handling, and target acquisition. Let's talk about Gathering Light. So every time you get a kill, you're going to get a stack of Gathering Light. Stacks up to times 10. For every stack you have will grant you 10% of all of your ability energies, right? So if you have 10 stacks, that is 100% grenade, melee, and class ability energy instantly. Okay, now of course you have to get 10 kills or kill some higher health targets to get more stacks, but this is a very strong option because you get your ability energy gains are just passively, I guess not passively, but they're building, and it's very, very strong. If you have a very ability based build, this could be a good option. And I wouldn't, well, we'll talk about that in a second. The strengths, of course, the energy return, like we said, very high. It's not difficult to get 10 stacks and then instantly get your entire grenade, melee, and class ability back. And of course, the stats on this thing has some crazy good stats. Like compared to every other 300 round per minute sidearm in the game, this thing's stats are just absolutely out the roof, which is a big strength for it. But it does have some weaknesses. It can feel cumbersome with the energy gains. What do I mean by that? Well, when you have stacks of Gathering Lights, you have to press, activate your reload button. This can be kind of slow. It does this real slow animation, kind of reload animation. You just get them back. Very nice, but again, in fast-paced environments, it can just kind of feel slow and like it's not, doesn't feel fast. And it's a sidearm. Sidearms should feel fast and, active. This weapon can feel not quite that way. Now also the perks on this weapon with the catalyst, we'll talk about in just a second, can be kind of counterintuitive to the playstyle. This weapon is an odd one because it wants you to gain stacks so that you can get your abilities back, but also Gift of the Traveler makes it where you don't want to use those stacks. And same thing with the catalyst here. The catalyst provides osmosis and surplus, which surplus, again, it makes you want to have abilities up at all times. So you don't want to use your abilities. So then it's just a weird loop. You know, like I feel like it could be changed to encourage the use of more abilities. But this is what we got. Osmosis here will change your grenade. I'm sorry, using your grenade partially refills the magazine and changes this weapon's damage type to match your grenade until you stow it, which is really nice. So if you're using a solar subclass, for example, throw a grenade and this weapon, even though it's a kinetic, becomes solar, which is really nice. And then surplus says, or states increasing handling, reload speed, and stability for each fully charged ability. So yeah, this weapon, it's good. It's very good at getting energy back. Like if you are somebody who likes an ability build, this could easily be something that you could look into, but it can feel just a little bit slow at times. Let's move on to the next weapon, which is Izanagi's Burden. And Izanagi's Burden is a kinetic sniper rifle. Comes with the perk Honed Edge. Hold your alternate weapon action, so your reload button, to consume the magazine and load a round with additional range and damage. It also has no distractions. Aiming with this weapon for a short period reduces flinch, which is not a exotic perk, but it's on there. Basically, the way this works, when you have ammo in the magazine, click and hold your reload button. It will do a reload action, and depending on how many rounds you had in your magazine, it will give you stacks of Honed Edge, up to ×4. Then your next shot, you'll only have one round in the magazine, but that shot will deal a ton of damage. Strengths of this weapon: this has extremely high burst damage. And when I say burst damage, it is basically just like one shot, because the animation of reloading and then activating the weapon and stuff is very slow. But it has a lot of damage. Of course, it's a sniper. It has mega high range, which is nice. And you can actually combo this very well with rockets. Doing Izanagi rocket swapping is always a great damage or DPS strategy. But really, this thing's major strength is that it has extremely high burst damage. It does have some weaknesses though. It's subject to flinch. It's a sniper rifle. Being flinched off target, especially while you're taking these high damage shots, can feel very bad if you like take a shot and you miss that shot, because you're going to blow through ammo very quickly. It does consume a lot of ammo. And this weapon, just like any other sniper linear fusion rifle, it does rely on critical damage. So if you are flinched off target and you don't hit your crits, you just wasted a massive amount of damage potential. Kind of a risk reward kind of thing. It is a sniper, so you can sit way, way back and use this and, you know, deal your damage. So that's something that can balance it out. But yeah, it's still, you know, these downsides are something that kind of make me not use it quite as much as I probably should or could. But let's talk about the catalyst. The catalyst basically just increases the damage bonus of Honed Edge when 4 bullets are consumed. So when you have Honed Edge ×4, you're dealing more damage. I want to say it's like 20% more damage. It's basically the damage of 5 shots instead of just 4, which is really, really nice. Again, it just increases that burst damage even more. Izanagi's Burden is a burst monster, a burst DPS monster. But let's go ahead and talk about the next one, because that's all I have to say about Izanagi's Burden. It's a very simple, straightforward weapon. Next one, we have Red Death Reformed. This is one of the most recent exotics we've got in the game. It is a solar pulse rifle. Comes with a perk Redemption. Final blows with this weapon cure you and increase reload speed. Reloading after final blows cures nearby allies. So in this perk, every time you get a kill, you're being cured, which is it's cure ×2. So you're getting 120 HP back just instantly. And then it also has basically heal clip built into it. When you reload, it will give your allies 60 HP as long as they're close by. Its other exotic perk here is Inverse Relationship. When you deal damage with this weapon, it gains increased handling, it takes reduced flinch, and movement speed is increased for a short time. When you are at reduced health, this weapon deals additional damage. It's a lot to unpack, so let's go ahead and break it down. As you're dealing damage, it gets increased handling, you take less flinch, and your movement speed is slightly increased. So that's like just shooting it and hitting targets will do that for you. You don't have to do anything else. But when you get to low health, that's where things start kicking off, because the weapon will start dealing more damage. And inside of PvP, it's not that much, but in PvE, it is a pretty substantial boost to the damage. Again, this is kind of helping you get back to a healthy spot in terms of like how much health you have. The strings. This weapon has super high survivability. Of course it does. Every kill you get, you're getting 120 HP back instantly. The stat boosts, sorry, that come with inverse relationship feel amazing. Like, this is a 340 pulse rifle. Should have said that earlier, which means it is a very slow handling, slow everything pulse rifle. But when you deal damage with it, it makes it feel like it has quick draw. It makes it feel like it has snapshot, and it makes it feel just incredibly, it's an incredible weapon. Then when you get kills, it basically gives you outlaw speed reloads. And it's not even on precision kills. It's any kill that you get will increase reload speed. It feels absolutely fantastic. And of course, it has solar synergy because it cures allies, which is always a nice thing to have on any weapon. It does have some weaknesses though. Primary weakness, it feels a little bit underwhelming. And the reason why is because survivability is not an issue in most levels of content. Like, yes, like getting kills with this weapon feels great because you're topping off your health basically every time you get a kill. It has a catalyst that we'll talk about here in just a second that does a really, really wonderful thing. But at the same time, survivability is not too hard, especially if you're already playing on the Solar subclass. You know, if you're playing Solar Titan, Solar Warlock, Solar Hunter, and you have access to Cure and Restoration and stuff, it's not hard to stay alive. Plus, if you have teammates that are building into support roles and doing these things for you, Red Death is going to feel like kind of a little bit of a wasted exotic slot. So that's the only real problem with this weapon, is that, you know, it can feel underwhelming because it's already pretty easy to stay alive in most levels of Destiny 2 content. Now the catalyst here does something like I said, it does something amazing for the weapon. Final blows charge this weapon. Takes two final blows to fully charge. When the weapon is fully charged, the next final blow creates a healing burst at your location and leaves a remnant behind that provides restoration to allies. Basically, what this does is when you get 2 final blows, your next kill will drop a healing grenade at your body, okay, or at wherever you're standing. You will instantly pick up that healing grenade, so it'll give you restoration ×2 or ×1, depending on your fragments, I guess, or aspects, sorry. And it will give you a big chunk of your health. And then if your teammates walk into it, it will also grant them those same bonuses. And like I said, it's basically every 3rd kill you're getting that. So very, very nice catalyst. Again, the survivability is very high, but is survivability an issue? In most cases, I would say no. But that's Red Death. And I believe Red Death is the last A tier weapon I have on here. Now we're going to go to B tier. B tier, these weapons are mostly good, but they will require a lot more build crafting to be, used to their full potential, I guess. They can also be more difficult to use outside of niche scenarios, but can still hold their own when paired with builds that center around the weapon. So if you're building into these weapons, or if, I think something I forgot to put in here, or if there's very niche situations, these weapons will excel very well. But again, it's not like you just put this weapon on and profit. Like, they have certain stipulations behind them. The first one we have here is Eriana's Vow, which is a special ammo solar hand cannon. And I say that because this is the only special ammo hand cannon in the game. But it comes with the perks, looks can kill. This weapon fires shield piercing ammunition and comes with a scope. Strong against barrier champions. Breaking a matched shield or piercing a champion's barrier will cause the target to ignite, which obviously we see ignite there, solar synergy. It also has the perk Death at First Glance, bonus damage when aiming down sights on the opening shot of an attack. This bonus is preserved if the shot deals precision damage or strikes an elemental shield. Strengths of this weapon, of course, it has anti-champion capability. Okay, that's, I think this is only the 3rd, if I'm not mistaken, the 3rd weapon that has anti-champion capability. So this is built in, very nice. It does have ignition damage, which means it can synergize with solar stuff, which I didn't put that in here, but yeah, it can deal with solar situations. And it is very ammo efficient. I think you can hold like 35 or 40 rounds at base with this weapon. And it deals enough damage that you don't have to use it too often. Like, ammo should never be a concern with Eriana's Vow. But it does have some weaknesses. It has some stiff competition for anti-champion. Granted, the competition cannot be bought from the Monuments of Lost Lights, but it has Arbalest, it has Wish Ender, which it's contending with, plus, of course, depending on the mod for the season, the anti-champion mods for the season, it can have some stiff competition, which makes it a very debatable weapon to use for its anti-barrier capability. The damage output is also not as high as other weapons. Even though it's a special weapon, it's not dealing as much damage as something like, you know, Izanagi's Burden, for example. But it's still pretty good. One of the other strengths I actually forgot to put in here, there is a very particular build you can do that literally just triggers ignition after ignition after ignition, which is absolutely incredible. But again, that is a very specific, very, you know, a very specific build that you have to have in order to do that. Like, you don't just put this on and it just constantly triggers ignitions. Like, there's some stipulations behind it. But it does have a catalyst. The catalyst increases the magazine size and gives it auto-loading holster, so the weapon will automatically reload itself over a short period of time, which is really good. It brings the magazine, I think, up to 8 rounds. It has a base magazine of 6, brings it up to 8, and then it has a very, very slow reload speed, so having auto-loading holster is very nice. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing super special about Eriana's Vow, so we'll go on to the next one. Tommy's Matchbook, which is a solar auto rifle, and oh my goodness, now Tommy's Matchbook is one of the most fun weapons in the game, but I really couldn't bring myself to put it any higher than B tier. Let's talk about what it does. Ignition Trigger is the exotic perk. Sustained fire with this weapon overheats it, increasing damage but burning the user. Then it has heat sink. Overheat damage is reduced while not aiming down sight, so when you're hip firing. Basically, the way this works, as you're sustaining fire, once you hit 20 rounds, it will clock into overcharge mode. And when it's overcharged, it deals double damage, but it also slowly takes off your health. Now, takes off your shields. It won't kill you. This weapon will not kill you, but if you are constantly firing, it will keep you at red health basically at all times, unless you build into it in certain ways. The strengths of this weapon, it has very, very high damage output for a primary. We're going to talk about why, but that's due to the catalyst. It also has very strong ad control. It's got a 100-round magazine. I didn't put that on here, but it's got a 100-round magazine, which is really awesome because it allows you to just melt everything. And again, once you're overcharged and you're dealing double damage, yeah, your ad control is fantastic. It also does have that solar synergy again through the catalyst, which we'll talk about in just a second. Weaknesses though, the very obvious weakness is that it harms the user. This is not something like Dragon's Breath or Sleeper Simulant where, oh, like it can accidentally harm you. Like when you're using this, you are actively using it knowing that it's going to burn you up, so to speak. So yeah, that's just something to keep in mind. It also has a very slow reload speed. Its reload speed is a whopping 0, which is crazy. It has a 100-round magazine, which offsets that a little bit. But once you run out of ammo, it's going to take a while to reload. And of course, hip firing is encouraged. With this weapon, hip firing actually feels pretty good. I'm not going to lie. But hip firing is, I would say, most players, like not most players' things in Destiny 2. But it does have a catalyst. And the catalyst, I would also say, is something that is necessary. I forgot to put that in the weaknesses here, but the catalyst is necessary. While ignition trigger is active, your health recovers more quickly, which is nice. But the big thing is that sustained fire scorches your target. Now, what does this mean? This means that after, I believe, 20 bullets, your target is going to ignite and explode, which means that its ad clear is even better, right? Because, you know, causing ignitions, especially if you build into solar, you know, and those ignitions, like you're going to have mega large ignitions. They're going to be dealing a ton of damage. Like it's a really fun weapon. The catalyst is really a must because it gives it all the solar synergy, and all the, like everything under the strengths here is because of the catalyst. Like if you're just doing this, the damage output it's higher than normal, but I wouldn't say it's anything crazy. But with the catalyst, because you can cause ignitions, it gives it very high damage output. The ad control, again, is strong with this, but it's made even better through the catalyst. Plus, your health recovers more quickly. This is a nice little feature, I guess. This basically gives you like but it basically gives you tier like 13, essentially, recovery, which is pretty nice. Again, it will not kill you. It will take off your white health bar. It'll put you in red health at all times, but it won't burn you down any further than the red health threshold. But it's a fun weapon, but it's really niche. So yeah, that's Tommy's Matchbook. Let's move on to the next one, which is Ticuu's Divination. And Ticuu's Divination is a solar combat bow. Comes with the perk Sacred Flame. Hip firing this weapon fires multiple tracking projectiles. Targets marked by these projectiles explode on death or when struck by another Sacred Flames explosion. Causality arrows. Arrows fired while aiming down sights cause Sacred Flames to instantly detonate. Precision hits with perfectly drawn arrows increase the power of this detonation. This is a very fun weapon. This is a very, it's a solid weapon. It's got some good strengths here. It's got very, very high ad clear potential, like very high ad clear potential. It can also be very strong against high health targets too. But the downsides of it, and this is why I put it in B tier and not any higher, it will struggle, of course, against very high health targets. So things like champions, it's not going to do well against. The biggest thing, the two big things. Number one, there's no solar synergy, which is really unfortunate because if it had solar synergy, I probably would have put it in A tier, maybe S tier. But the other weakness of this weapon is that it can be really confusing to understand how it works, because once you start getting causality arrows, Sacred Flame, and then the catalyst thrown in there, it can be very confusing. I'll try to break it down and explain it. But the catalyst states perfectly drawn arrows that detonate Sacred Flame increase arrow damage. Striking targets unaffected by Sacred Flame instead refreshes causality arrows duration. So you've got Sacred Flame, which is hip fire. Okay, it will have a little diamond on the enemies, up to 3 of them. When you shoot it, it'll hit them. Those hip fire projectiles deal very little damage. Okay, it's almost like priming them is what it's doing. It's priming enemies. So it will mark those targets with Sacred Flame. Then when you hit a target with Sacred Flame, arrows fired while aiming down sights will cause Sacred Flame to instantly detonate. So it doesn't have to be a precision shot. You just, if you ADS and shoot an enemy, you know, with the bow, it will cause that explosion. Then any other enemies that are around that have Sacred Flame applied to them, if they're near that explosion, they're touched by that explosion, they will also explode. So long as you, See, look at, I'm getting confused myself here. This is a confusing weapon. The catalyst makes it more confusing. I'm not going to try to explain it all the way. Just, it's something that when you start using, you'll understand how it works. But it can be a confusing weapon. That's why I put it in B tier. Other than that, though, it's a pretty solid option. Let's move on. Grand Overture, which is an arc machine gun. And I say it's a machine gun, but it fires very differently than any other machine gun. It almost fires kind of like a fusion rifle almost. It comes with the exotic perks Wrath of the Colossus and Omega Strike. Wrath of the Colossus states heavy slug launcher that charges, then fires full auto while the trigger is held. Basically, you click and hold the trigger, it will charge up, and then once it starts shooting, it fires at 100 rounds per minute. It will just continuously shoot over and over, like just one round every like 3/4 of a second, something like that. It comes with the other perk, Omega Strike. Landing hits with a slug launcher loads missiles. Then you click and hold your reload button to fire several missiles in a volley. As you're hitting targets with its regular fire mode, you're building missile stacks. Once you get to times 20, that's the max, or any stack you want really, but times 20 is the max. You can switch to your fire mode and then unload those missiles into enemies. Strengths. This weapon has crazy high burst damage. Okay, now you have to build up to it. We'll just pull this up. Oh, I didn't put it on there, but this weapon has super high burst damage. In fact, in some instances, like against the final boss of the Vesper's Host, this weapon is a lot of players prefer to use this weapon over anything else. It has extremely high burst damage. It also does have arc synergy. That's through the catalyst. I'll go ahead and pull the catalyst up right here so y'all can start reading it. But the weaknesses, primarily, it requires setup. You can't just unload your shots with this. Like, you have to build up to it. You have to fire 20 rounds into an enemy and get 20 stacks of missiles to get the maximum potential out of this weapon. It also it doesn't have a whole lot of reserves. Like machine guns, you typically think of like 400 reserves, 300, 400 reserves. This weapon has like 60 total shots. Like it's got 20 in the magazine, then 40 in reserves at base, which is not a lot of ammo. So every shot counts. So if you are missing shots, that can be very devastating, and something that you want to try not to be doing. Now, I'll read about the catalyst real quick. The missile explosions will blind combatants, and those defeated by missile impacts will then explode. This gives it arc synergy, which is, of course, just, I mean, it's arc synergy. It's nice. But yeah, it's a fun weapon because the 20 missiles that come out of this are launched in like a span of like 1 second. Like, it's not like, oh, it just shoots like, over 3 or 4 seconds, a bunch of missiles. No, like, it literally is a blow your load type of weapon. Like, it is a fun gun. It can damage you if you're too close to the enemy that you're trying to shoot that missile burst with. But it has really high damage potential. It has really high damage potential. But yeah, if you're missing shots and not getting to that maximum of 20 stacks of missiles, you're just missing out on damage, because when you actually fire your missile volley, it doesn't consume like 20 ammo. Like, if you have 20 missile stacks, it doesn't consume 20 ammo. It consumes, I believe, 1 ammo, which is incredible. Okay, so you're basically getting 20 missiles just basically for free. 19 technically, but Grand Overture, very fun option, very strong at very certain things, but again, it's a niche weapon. Moving on, we have Wicked Implement, which is a stasis scout rifle, and I know somebody's going to be mad that I didn't put this higher up on the tier list, but I have a good reason for that. Stasis, it comes with creeping attrition. Rapidly landing precision hits causes the target to become slowed. Tithing Harvest. While creeping attrition is active, destroying stasis crystals or landing precision final blows creates a stasis shard. The stasis shard returns to you, and collecting stasis shards refills the magazine. So basically, once you land 3 precision hits, every hit after that will slow targets, and it will add more stacks of slow until you can freeze them, which is really awesome because slow and freeze is very strong in content. So you can do that with a scout rifle, so you can stay at a nice safe distance to do that. But while creeping attrition is active, if you destroy a stasis crystal or hit final blows, it will create a stasis shard that tracks all the way to you. Now, this is important because stasis, you can create stasis shards through your various harvest aspects, but they don't quite, like, they don't track like this does. Like, this thing will literally track you from like I remember sitting at what is it, on Sepix Prime, okay, sitting in the very back with Wicked Implement, shooting that tank from literally probably like 250 like meters away or something like some crazy distance, and every so often you just see a stasis crystal like come flying at you at 100 miles an hour. So that's pretty cool, and it'll refill the magazine when it does that. The strengths of this weapon. One of the biggest strengths of this weapon is it has multiple anti-champion capabilities. It has slow, and it has the ability to freeze. Slow will stagger overload champions, and freeze will stagger unstoppable champions. So right out the gate, Wicked Implements can slow 2 types of champions. No, it will not work if it has anti-barrier scout rifle like it does this season. But still, it's stunning 2 types of champions, which is a really nice aspect. It also has that delicious stasis utility, the ability to freeze and slow on the battlefield, whether you're using stasis or not. That is tremendous. And it's always good to have, the ability to freeze and slow targets on the battlefield. Plus, you can use this at long range to do that as well. It does have wonderful stasis synergy. Of course, if you're building into the stasis subclass, you can do a lot of things with that slow and freeze and that stasis shard. And of course, there is the passive energy gains you get from picking up stasis shards, which grant you 5% melee energy every time you pick one up. So if you're using, say, Strand or Arc, you'll be getting your melee back just a little bit faster because of Tithing Harvest and the ability to collect stasis shards. Let's talk about the weaknesses, though. This weapon, just like Polaris Lance, does not fare well in close ranges. Scout rifles are very difficult to use in close ranges, like, regardless. So that's kind of, that's one of the biggest downsides. It also has very low damage, unlike Polaris Lance that can cause rapid ignitions. You can slow and freeze targets and shatter those targets, but shatter does not deal nearly as much damage as ignitions, and it takes a little bit longer to shatter those targets. So its damage is overall lower than Polaris Lance, which can feel kind of bad. It can feel like a really slow weapon to use at times. Now, its catalyst gives it Headstone. Precision final blows spawn a stasis crystal at the victim's location. It also The catalyst will also grant another aspect where collecting stasis shards will gradually overfill the magazine. So with Tithing Harvest, when you collect a stasis shards, it will refill the magazine back to its 15 shots. But as you collect more stasis shards, it'll give you basically 5 rounds in the magazine every time you pick up a stasis shard. So if you pick up, I think up to a maximum of a 30 round magazine. I don't think it goes beyond 30 easily. But yeah, it's a pretty nice catalyst, especially because Headstone, if you get a kill with creeping attrition, it will spawn a stasis crystal. It will also spawn a stasis shard, so that you can get 2 shards from 1 kill, which is 10% melee energy plus whatever other business you have for stasis going on. Wicked Implement is it's a good weapon, but it's too, the reason I have it in B tier is just because it's just not quite as good as other options. Like, it does a lot of things for the player, but it's just not, like, it's low damage is really what makes it struggle like the most. Moving on, we have Centrifuse, which is an arc auto rifle, arc 450 round per minute auto rifle, so precision frame. It comes with the perk Overcharge Capacitor. Sprinting, sliding, and firing this weapon builds a temporary electrostatic charge, increasing range and reload speed. Final blows with high charge causes explosions, and maximum charge explosions blind targets. Regenerative motion will also, sprinting will gradually refill the magazine. Gradually reloads the weapon. It reloads 2 rounds every half a second. So like 4 rounds a second, I think, maybe a little bit more. But yeah, let's talk about this weapon. When you're doing basically anything on the battlefield, anything that is fast-paced, so sprinting, sliding, or firing, you're going to build up a little charge on the side of your screen. It's called overcharge capacitor. When you stop doing any of those things, that bar immediately starts to go down. Okay, so if you stop sprinting or sliding or firing, that charge will go down and you will lose, you'll lose your stacks. But if you can keep it up, which you can because of regenerative motion, whenever it's at max damage, it will cause blinding explosions, which is very good. It's arc. So yeah, there is a loop that we can take with this weapon. We'll just talk more about in just a second. The strengths of this weapon: arc synergy. Of course, it blinds targets. Need I say more? It can blind targets. It does work with amplification, which we'll talk about with the catalyst in just a second. And it does have that blinding capability. There are very few weapons that can blind. A Grand Overture is another one that can blind, but this one is a primary ammo weapon that can create blinding explosions, which is very nice. Weaknesses, though. Some might say this is a strength of the weapon. I consider it a weakness. It requires constant movement and constantly doing something to keep it at its potential. Okay, if you stop for even a second, or if you click your X button to reload the weapon, by the way, reloading the weapon will instantly remove the entire overcharge capacitor bar. So that's something you definitely don't want to do. But you have to constantly be moving, constantly be doing stuff. And that's just, that's difficult in Destiny. Like, even though it's a fast-paced game, it is difficult to constantly be sprinting, firing, sliding, stuff like that. Like, there's sometimes, after an encounter, you just want to stop for a second. Maybe you have an itch behind your ear, so you got to stop moving to scratch it real quick. It'll lose its charge. Now, it does have a catalyst. The catalyst is strongly encouraged. It's not necessary, but it is very strongly encouraged, because the catalyst states, while amplified, this weapon gradually gains overcharge. So what this means is that when you're amplified, you can just stand there and it will slowly, very slowly charge up that bar. That's not where the strength of it comes from, though. When you're amplified and you're shooting and getting kills and all that stuff, once that bar's full, as long as you're amplified, it won't drop down. Even if you stop moving, stop shooting, and just hold still, it won't drop until your amplification goes away. Now, reloading will still reset that charge bar, but when you're amplified, it makes it a lot easier to get it back, because sprinting and sliding and firing will actually still refill the charge bar. And when you're amplified, it gives it a little bit of faster charge time, essentially. But yeah, this weapon, it's a good gun. It's a 450 auto rifle, which I think 450 auto rifles are really not that great in PvE activities right now. I think most players are preferring to use 720s or even 600s. But outside of that, like I said, like, just the constant movement that is required and the building into arc that you have to get amplified and stuff can make this weapon kind of a turnoff, especially if you're a player that doesn't care much for arc. But that's Centrifuse. I misspelled Centrifuse. Oops. Oh, you know what else? Let me go ahead and shift us down to B tier here too. Oops. There we go. Okay. Because we're on B tier. Let's move on to the next one, which is Ager's Scepter. And Ager's Scepter is a... Oh, yeah, no, that's right. Ager's Scepter. This is a stasis trace rifle, and I already know there's an army of people getting ready to roast me in the comments for putting this in B tier, but I do have my reasons as to why. Comes with the perk Ager's Call. Final blows with this weapon generate a slowing burst around the defeated targets. Very good. Riga's Refrain is the second perk. Stasis final blows transfer ammo to this weapon's magazine from reserves. So basically has an auto-loading feature. The strengths of this weapon does have incredible ad control. Okay, it really does. You are constantly slowing and freezing targets, and with a catalyst, which completely changes how the weapon works. Talk about it in just a second. It has incredible ad control. It does have stasis synergy as well. I think that all stasis weapons have really good stasis synergy. We could implement this one. I think there's another one up here on the list we're going to talk about in a little bit. But it also does have an auto-loading capability through through Riga's Refrain. So that's also just a nice, convenient, convenience thing. The weaknesses, though. And let's pull up the catalyst here so we can talk about the catalyst too. Trace rifles are not really in the best spot. They haven't ever been. They just need a buff, some kind of buff. Not sure how it is, but they're not in a good spot. This is a trace rifle, so it's going to just suffer because of that. But the catalyst is necessary to make this thing good, because the catalyst states that alternate weapon action, so click and hold your reload button to drain super energy. But when you drain super energy, it will overflow the magazine and empower the beam with bonus damage and the ability to slow and freeze targets until the magazine or super energy runs out, or the weapon is stowed. Can only be activated when super energy is full. So let me just break this down. When you have a full super bar, you can click and hold your reload button to start draining your super. So it takes away your super. But as soon as you do this, it will double the magazine. And once it doubles the magazine, the laser beam that comes from the weapon will slow and freeze on hit. So no longer does it just require slow, final blows. It slows and freezes on hit until your super energy runs out, or until the weapon's magazine runs out, which with Riga's Refrain, probably not going to happen, especially if you build up into some reserve armor, some ammo reserve mods. But catalyst, like I said, is necessary to make it good. Like I don't think I've ever seen somebody using Ager's Scepter without the catalyst, like just using it just because, like, oh yeah, I love Ager's Scepter just because of how it is. No, they use it because of the super drain ability. Now, the catalyst, like we said, it will remove your super ability. This is I guess this is more or less a personal thing. Like if you don't mind losing your super, if you don't use your super that much, or if you don't, like your super, whatever it might be, then by all means, this would be a great option to use. Me personally, I love using supers. I think that supers are incredibly powerful and they're kind of easy to get back. I don't care much for this weapon. Now, again, if you're one of those people who loves this weapon and you swear by everything that it is an S tier weapon, please go in the comments and tell me why. But for me, I couldn't put it any higher than B tier. But let's move on to the next weapon. Oh, I'm sorry. That was it for B tier. Oops. We are now moving on to C tier weapons. So let me change this real quick. Moving on to our C tier weapons. And with our C tier weapons, these weapons can have potential, but for the most part, they're outclassed by other options. They have synergy with subclasses, but it does not substantially add to the weapon's performance. So they might have little things here and there that, like, oh yeah, it synergizes, but it doesn't synergize like great. And the weapons are also considered to be very niche and do not mix well in most other situations or build. So these are weapons that, you have to build into, and if you're not building into them, then they're just not going to be all that good, or they just have such niche like situations that it's there's not really much point in using them. But let us move on to the first one, which I have the last word here, which is a kinetic hand cannon. Now, this is an interesting one we're going to talk about. So it comes with the perk Fanfire. This weapon fires in full auto. So this is a hand cannon that is fully automatic. Hip fire shots deal precision damage. I'm sorry, hip fire shots deal bonus precision damage while increasing reload speed and accuracy. It also has hip fire grip, which increases accuracy, stability, and precision hit targeting when firing from the hip. Basically, this is a cowboy gun. Okay, you do not aim down sights with this weapon. The reason why I put it in C tier and not D tier is because, first of all, it does have a high fun factor. Like, if you get this gun, you're gonna feel like a space cowboy. Like, it is, I mean, it's the classic, like, you know, you got your finger on the trigger and your left hand is hammering the trigger to keep it firing, which is really fun. But the reason I put this in C tier is because this performs very well in PvP activities. And I know that I would say that if you're a newer player, you're probably not in PvP all that much, which is why it's in C tier. Like, if this was a PvP exclusive video, like, I would put this probably in A tier, maybe even S tier, but I think A tier would be a better place for it. But in PvE, this thing is not good at all. And reason why, first reason, the magazine is tiny. It's 8 rounds, okay, which is a micro magazine. It's terrible in PvE activities, and it has no catalyst. And in fact, I think this is the first weapon we've had on this list without a catalyst. Yes, you get the increased reload speed from hitting precision, or from hitting shots while hip firing. It's not anything crazy. This is 100% through and through a PvP weapon, and it does do well in PvP, but in PvE, no, it's not that good. That's really all I can say about Last Word. If you like PvP, or if you want to try out PvP, go ahead and by all means get it and go have fun with it. Moving on to the next one, though, we have Worldline Zero, which is an arc sword. Comes with the exotic perk Tesseract. The heavy attack. While sprinting with full sword energy, launch a heavy blink attack. Press again after the strike to blink a second time. Then it has a perk Tireless Blade, sword ammo granted for every other powered sword kill. Basically, after you sprint for a very short duration, it will activate Tesseract, and then when you use your heavy attack, it will teleport you forward and do like a what is it, a whirlwind blade, or not a whirlwind blade, what is it, a vortex frame blade attack. It'll spin and deal a bunch of damage. Then you can activate that a second time. Shrinks. It's got high burst damage. I mean, I won't deny that. It's like Tesseract's, like, you know, you can quickly get in there and deal a ton of damage because it deals, I believe it deals more damage than a standard vortex frame sword, and you can do the attack twice. So that's definitely its strength. But the weaknesses, primary weakness, it puts the user at risk. If you are in any higher level content, like just a Grandmaster, for example, running in there and attacking an enemy, you know, you teleport in, okay, that's super cool and all that. You do it twice, high burst damage, you kill a champion, you're still sitting like a sitting duck, and you're out of sword energy, so you can't block, you know, any damage that's incoming. And so that's why it's in C tier. It's nothing special. It does have a catalyst. The catalyst just reduces the activation time for Tesseract. This sword just needs some work done to it to make it more, just make it a better weapon all around. You know, maybe give us the ability to teleport back to our original location or something like that. But yeah, that's Worldline Zero, and that's all I have to say about it. Let's go to the next one. Jötunn. Sorry, charge shot. Holding down the trigger, hold down the trigger to charge up a tracking shot that explodes and burns on impact. Oh, this is a solar fusion rifle, by the way. It also has shield disorients, which states that energy matched shield explosion disorients nearby combatants. And I marked this one in gold because there are no more weapons that can roll with shield disorient. So even though it's technically a legendary perk, it's kind of exotic because I think the only other perk, or the only other weapon with shield disorient that you can get in the game currently is an old Gambit shotgun, old Gambit curated shotgun called the Python. The strengths of this weapon: it has solar synergy through the catalyst, which we'll talk about in just a second. It also has high damage. I mean, I won't deny that. Like that ball of fire that comes out of it. Like, it's not like a fusion rifle, like where it shoots a bunch of bolts. No, it shoots one flaming ball of fire that tracks towards enemies and blows up. So it does have high damage. It does have that tracking capability as well, which, oh yeah, it does say tracking shot. So it makes it a little bit easier to hit. I wouldn't necessarily like try to, like, it's not, the tracking is nothing crazy. It's not like, you know, a truth rocket launcher tracking or anything like that. Like, it just kind of goes towards the target. So in slow moving targets or in situations where you're maybe above the target you're shooting at, you're probably going to hit your shot, you know, and deal a bunch of damage. But it does have some weaknesses. It's underwhelming. Like that's the biggest weakness. It's just underwhelming for an exotic. Yes, it sounds cool, but what is it really doing for you that other fusion rifles and stuff can't do? The answer is not a whole lot. Like, yeah, it's easy to use because it can have that tracking. You also don't have to worry about, you know, range because it's just a fireball projectile that hits targets. But it's really just an underwhelming exotic. It's fun, but it's just underwhelming. It does have a catalyst too. The catalyst grants the perks Incandescent and Cornered. Incandescent, defeating multiple targets, defeating a target, spreads Scorch to those nearby. And then Cornered has a faster charge time when surrounded by combatants. These really complement the weapon. Of course, that's where the solar synergy comes from, is Incandescent. But other than that, it's just an underwhelming exotic. I mean, I couldn't bring myself to put it any higher than this. Like, other fusion rifles will do comparable work to Jötunn. Moving on, let's talk about Thorn. And I know there's people in here that aren't going to like the placement of Thorn in C tier, but I have good reasons for it. Thorn is a kinetic 140 hand cannon. Thorn, we made a mention of talking about when we were talking about Lumina earlier in the video. Thorn is Lumina's counterpart. It comes with the perk Mark of the Devourer. Rounds pierce targets and deal damage over time. Kills with this weapon leave behind remnants, just like with Lumina. Same principle. They're floating, instead of white, though, on this one, they're green. They're floating green bubbles, and once you get close to them, they'll track towards you. It also has the perk Soul Devourer. Absorbing a remnant strengthens Mark of the Devourer and partially refills the magazine. Again, it gives you 4 rounds back in the magazine, and it makes the damage over time from Mark of the Devourer deal substantially more damage. The strengths of this hand cannon, number 1 strength, it has higher damage than other hand cannons because of Mark of the Devourer. And especially if you have Soul Devourer active, you know, you are going to be dealing, I want to say almost double damage per hand cannon shot. Now, granted, it's not precision and it is over time, but still, you can't deny that it does more damage than other 140 hand cannons. It also does have that auto-loading capability through the Remnant collection. But let's talk about the weaknesses of it. This thing is lacking the power that other exotics have. This is basically a hand cannon that deals more damage per shot, and that's really it. You know, Lumina, we talked about Lumina. Lumina can do all kinds of stuff. It can heal your allies. It gives you a massive damage boost to all your weapons. Like, this weapon just makes Thorn stronger, which is not like a bad thing, but it's just meh. It can also be risky to retrieve the remnants. One of the key differences between Thorn remnants and Lumina remnants, for some reason, Lumina remnants travel faster and they have a further tracking range than Thorn remnants. So Lumina, like I didn't put this in Lumina saying because Lumina's, they track from like 12 meters. Thorn seems to track from like 8 to 9 meters and they track a lot slower. So you run the risk of, like, if you're running by trying to grab one, it might be too slow to catch up to you, which is a really odd thing. I think that they should have the same speed, but yeah, whatever. The catalyst, there is a catalyst for this weapon. It says it grants bonus range and stability. These are both really nice boosts to the weapon that bring its, these boosts bring its performance in PvP up substantially. It also states that dealing a final blow or absorbing a remnant grants additional increased weapon range as well as increased mobility and handling for a short time. Also something that I forgot to mention about Soul Devourer. Soul Devourer will not only partially refill the magazine, but it will overflow the magazine up to 40 rounds. So unlike Lumina, where it's capped at 12, Thorn can hypothetically get 40 rounds in its magazine. So if you're killing a bunch of red bar enemies, you can build up a really high magazine for a hand cannon. Like 40 rounds in a hand cannon is just ridiculous. But yeah, that's something I forgot to mention. But the catalyst here, whenever you pick up a remnant, like, it just increases your stats even further. So this seems to be like a PvP catalyst, and this weapon does perform well in PvP, but in PvE activities, which is where most newer players are starting at, I cannot bring myself to use it. I almost put this in D tier. I almost put it in D tier, but I felt like too many people would be mad if I put it in D tier. So I put it in C tier instead. Moving on, though, we are going to talk about Bastion, the kinetic fusion rifle. And this is the only kinetic fusion rifle in the game. So this does make this weapon very unique. There are other fusion rifles in that slot, you know, Strand and Stasis, but this is the only true kinetic fusion rifle. Comes with the perk Saint's Fists. Rapidly fires 3 spreads of pure force. After a successful melee hit, this weapon gains increased damage, recharge time, and improved reload speed for a short duration. Hitting a target with most of the pellets in a burst increases melee damage for a short duration. That was a lot to unpack. Let's go ahead and break it down. So first of all, when you shoot it, it's not shooting like other fusion rifles. Instead of shooting, you know, those anywhere from 12 to 5 to 12 bolts, you are shooting a volley of 3 shots that come out. 1, 2, 3. And they're all, I think they have 8 pellets in each one, and they're all very nicely organized. Like, it's not like a random spread. Like, they are in a circle. It is it's a lot more damage than a standard fusion rifle. After a successful melee hit, you will get increased damage, reduced charge time, and improved reload speed with this weapon. So you punch something, and then you get these benefits. Hitting a target with most of the pellets in a burst will increase your melee damage. Okay, so you fire, say you're shooting at a champion, barrier champion, or unstoppable champion. We'll just use that as an example. Shoot the unstoppable champion, then you punch. You'll deal more punch damage, or more melee damage, I should say, to that champion. Then once you do that melee damage, you're going to increase this weapon's damage even further. That's basically how it works. Its perk here, Breakthrough, it fires staggering projectiles at strong against unstoppable champions. Literally, it's just anti-champion for the perk here. At one point, this weapon would deal damage through enemy shields, which was pretty cool. I think they should have left that on here, but let's talk about its strengths. This weapon will build nicely into melee setups. Like, if you're doing a melee class, like, this weapon is definitely something you can use and do well with, but there are also other better options. Like, Monte Carlo is also a melee based weapon, and Monte Carlo is arguably much better than this one. This one does have high burst damage. Again, not as high as some of the other stuff we've seen on the list today, but this one does have high burst damage. It does have anti-champion capability, the unstoppable champion, so that's pretty straightforward. And like we said earlier, this is the only kinetic fusion rifle in the game currently. If you're watching this in a couple months, maybe they added another one, but as of right now, this is the only kinetic fusion rifle, so it does have that leg up on the competition. Weaknesses, though. It's lackluster for an exotic. This is a commonality that we're going to see, in the C tier and the D tier, but it just doesn't feel like there's anything just like really going for it. Like I said, like, yeah, like it helps with your melee. It gives you like 1-2 punch and trench barrel, essentially, are the 2 perks that it gives. But at the same time, it's just like, okay, 1-2 punch, trench barrel. Like, I would rather use that with a shotgun, than a fusion rifle. It's kind of boring for an exotic. And yeah, like, it staggers unstoppable champions, but I don't know. Plus, I didn't put this on here, but plus, if you're in Grandmaster high level content where you're not wanting to use melee builds, this weapon's not going to do you any good. It also does not have a catalyst. So we're going to move on to the next one, the Fourth Horseman. This is an arc shotgun. I forgot to highlight arc blue. Oops. This weapon's perks are Thunder. This weapon's rate of fire is significantly increased and fires in full auto. Broadside. Each successive shot has more damage and more spread. Fourth Horseman is such a fun weapon. Its strengths, it has very high burst damage, and with the catalyst, it makes it even higher. This thing has the potential to like nuke like champions. Okay, like, it deals a buttload of damage, but I want to stress here, it is burst damage. It is not sustained damage. That's a very important thing to bring up and mention here. The weaknesses, it is very risky to use. It's a shotgun, and not only that, but it is a very close range shotgun. When I tell you that you have to barrel stuff this thing into your enemy's like belly or their throat or whatever it is, like, I mean, you have to be on top of your enemy to use this. So that naturally makes it not really viable in most in-game content. Not only that, but it blows through ammo so fast. With the catalyst, which I'll go ahead and pull up here, with the catalyst, you're shooting 5 shots per magazine. I think it base holds 20 rounds. So you got 4 super mega high damage burst like opportunities, and then you're out of ammo. So it burns through ammo really, really fast. The catalyst will add an additional round to the magazine and increase the reload speed, which is nice. The additional round builds into broadside nicely because each successive shot has more damage and more spread. But yeah, Fourth Horseman, very high damage. burst damage, sorry, very high burst damage, but it's too risky to use. I didn't put it in D tier because I don't really have a good reason why I didn't put it in D tier. I didn't put it in D tier. I didn't put it in D tier because it has very niche usage, but in those niches, it's gonna do well. But yeah, that's Fourth Horseman. Sorry. Let's move on to the next weapon, which is Duality, which is a solar shotgun. This is also still in C tier. Comes with the perk Compression Chamber. Fires a pellet spread in hip fire or a single high damage slug while aiming down sights. Right off the bat, this is a combination of a slug shotty and a pellet shotty, which is very interesting, very good for PvP, which we'll talk about in just a second. It has the perk On Black Wings. Pellet final blows grant stacking precision damage and reload speed buff. Precision hits with slugs extend the duration. This stacks up to 3 times, I think, and I think it gives it up to 50% more damage, which is pretty substantial, not gonna lie. The strengths of this weapon, it's great in PvP. This was at one point my absolute favorite shotgun to use in PvP because of its versatility, the ability to hip fire if somebody walks around the corner and surprises you, or the ability to slide in and take somebody's head off with a slug round is great. And this weapon, again, if you're looking for an S tier Crucible shotgun, I would say this is an S tier Crucible shotgun. Unfortunately, that's about the only thing it has going for it. It does not have anything. It doesn't have much in terms of PvE activities. Yes, On Black Wings is a damage boost, which can be nice, but at the same time, like I would just use other shotguns, like I would use other exotics over this one any day of the week. Its Catalyst also grants it plus 20 range and plus 2 to its magazine size, bringing its magazine size from 6 to 8, I believe, or is it maybe it's 8 to 10? I don't remember. But it also gives it 20 range. Again, that just adds to its PvP capabilities. Like, it is a great shotgun in PvP. Just like Last Word, if this was a PvP list, this would be up there. I would put this one in S tier, straight up. But that's Duality. I can't put it higher than C because, again, considering PvE is like 75 to 80% of Destiny 2, it belongs here. Oh, one of my notes. I only put this in C tier because it is excellent in the Crucible. I would have put it in D tier if it was not. Moving on to Cryosthesia 77k. This is a stasis sidearm. Comes with the perk LN to burst. Hold your reload button to swap firing mode after a final blow to enable a charge shot. So you get a kill, you click and hold your reload button, and it will give you a charged shot. It also has the perk Liquid Cooling. Direct hits by a charged shot instantly freeze the target. Indirect hits freeze combatants and slow opposing guardians. So this has that stasis synergy that we're looking at. In fact, that's one of the things. Stasis synergy, again, all the stasis weapons have great stasis synergy. Like, I love stasis because it has so much synergy with the exotics that are in that class. But of course, easy to use. It's a sidearm. You just get a kill with it. You click and hold your reload button, and then you shoot a charge shot that will freeze enemies. It's very easy to use. It also does offer that stasis utility. So if you're on Solar, Arc, Void, Strand, whatever other subclass, Prismatic, you can have that stasis utility of freezing targets and locking down the battlefield with this weapon. Fortunately, its weaknesses, it's a slow firing sidearm. It's a 260 round per minute sidearm, so its damage is not really that great. It feels slow and sluggish to use on the battlefield, and also missing that charge shot can be very punishing. In fact, when you're using this, I would never recommend like shooting it directly at a target unless that target is very still and they're not going to move. And the reason why is because if you are shooting directly at a target and that target dodges out of the way, you'll completely miss the shot. I would recommend actually being high above the target. That way, if you miss the shot, you'll hit the ground and at least freeze that enemy, you know, a little bit away. But it does have a catalyst. Shattering a frozen target refills this weapon's magazine from reserves. Pretty easy, right? That's pretty straightforward catalyst. So it has that auto loading capability. You freeze a target with the weapon, then you go and melee that target. It'll shatter that target. Then it's automatically reloaded. You just kind of rinse and repeat the same loop over and over. But it's lackluster. Like the other stasis weapons we talked about, Wicked Implement is better than this. Ager Scepter better than this weapon. Like, this is probably the most lackluster of stasis exotic weapons. Actually, no, it's not. There is one more we're going to talk about, which is Verglas Curve. This is a stasis combat bow. Yeah, comes with the perk Hail Barrage. Final blows with this weapon grant stasis arrows. Your next hip fire shot will fire a volley, or will fire all of them in a single volley. So as you're getting kills, you're getting stacks of Hail Barrage. Hail Barrage stacks up to 5 times. Then when you hip fire this weapon, you draw the bow and it will shoot out all your arrows at once. Direct hits, Hailstorm, sorry, for Hailstorm here, direct hits with stasis arrows will freeze combatants and slow opposing guardians, and stasis arrows that impact the environment, so if they don't hit a target, will create stasis crystals. Which, yeah, strengths. Of course, stasis synergy. This is the same with all stasis weapons. It has that synergy there. If you are using, you know, some of the stasis fragments that give you faster grenade energy when you break a crystal, this weapon works well with it. It can reinforce a small area with stasis crystals. This is a big thing about this weapon. You know, if you have times 5 stacks of Hail Barrage, your teammate goes down. Maybe they were in the door, you know, maybe there's a doorway. You can shoot it in a doorway. It'll block that doorway, so allowing you to pick up your teammate or do whatever it is you need to do. That is something that I can't ignore. Unfortunately, that's the only strengths I can really think of for this weapon, aside from maybe making stasis crystals. The weaknesses, this is a bow that is better suited at close ranges, which doesn't sound that bad except for the fact that it is a bow. And because it's a bow, bows don't handle close ranges all that well. Also, the stasis arrows have steep drop when you're hip firing them. So they're not going to go all that far. Like, they're going to fire and they drop to the ground pretty quickly. These two things, like, again, like, are these weaknesses? Like, they are, but like maybe you're fine with it. I will say one thing about the close ranges. This is a lightweight charge time bow, so it's going to charge pretty fast, which is a good thing. But at the same time, it's not all that good. It has very specific niche scenarios, but I would probably use any other stasis weapon over this one. And if you're looking for stasis crystals, I would just use Salvation's Grip, which is not on this list because it's not a Monument to Lost Light exotic. But it also does have a catalyst here. Freezing or slowing a target grants this weapon a period of faster draw speed for a short period of time. This again will help it at those close ranges, but the catalyst is not necessary by any means. And I had a note here. I had to use this bow's ornament for the picture because the standard weapon screenshot I have will not properly have its background removed, which is so frustrating. When I was editing this, or when I was creating this slideshow, I had to use this weapon's ornament. So that's not what the normal bow looks like. Let's move on to the next one. Tessellation. Tessellation. Now, this is a unique fusion rifle because of its perk property, Undecidable. This weapon instrument topology adapts its damage type to match your equipped grenade, which means if you are using a solar subclass, it's going to be solar. If you're using a strand subclass, it's going to be strand. Now it's in the energy slot. I probably should have mentioned that. It is in the energy slot, so it's in that middle slot, which means, well, we'll talk about what that means in just a second, but it also says final blows grant grenade energy, so it basically has demolitionist on it. But really, where this weapon's exoticness kicks in at is property irreducible. Hold your reload button to consume your grenade to load a large projectile-shaped language that generates an elemental explosion on impact. You can turn this fusion rifle essentially into a rocket launcher with this perk. As long as you have a grenade, it'll take away your grenade, but it will give you basically a rocket launcher shot, which is really cool. The strengths of this weapon, first of all, it allows for 3 darkness energy weapons to be equipped. If you're using a stasis or strand subclass, or you have a stasis or strand grenade equipped on prismatic, you will be able to have a stasis weapon in the kinetic slot, a stasis weapon in the energy slot, and a stasis weapon in the heavy slot, which is something that I really feel like is important to note with this weapon. That's one of the strong suits that it does have, especially because, you know, you could use unraveling rounds, for example, and have unraveling rounds on literally all 3 of your weapons. It does grant grenade energy on kills, and it can have high burst damage because of that rocket launcher shot. Now, in order to get that high burst damage, oh, I didn't put it here, but in order to get that high burst damage, you have to build into it very specifically and have a very grenade-focused build to have that high burst damage. And that high burst damage is not nearly as high as something like Fourth Horseman or some of the other stuff, or Grand Overture, stuff like that. The weaknesses of this weapon, it is dependent on your grenade cooldown. If you have low discipline, or if you have a grenade that has is on a long cooldown and you're not able to get kills very fast, you're going to be struggling to use this weapon to its full potential. And it does have a catalyst. The catalyst, it does add a lot to this weapon. Targets near the blast of property irreducible are afflicted, burdens, cursed with an elemental effect matching your equipped grenade's damage type. So for solar, it's scorch, so that rocket launcher shot will scorch enemies. For stasis, it's slow. For strand, it's sever. For arc, it is blind, I believe. And then for void, it is weakened, I think. Or is it suppressed? I think it's weakened. I put this in C tier because it just, like, it's just not something that just is something. It's not something that just, oh, like, yeah, I love this, I want to use it. Like, it's cool that you can have 3 strand weapons or 3 stasis weapons, but outside of that, it's just not doing as much for me as I would like it to. Again, you can build, there's a hunter, I know there's a hunter class that uses the Moth Keeper's wraps, the Moth Keeper's wraps, and they have those exotic gauntlets, sorry, where you can have basically tons of grenades in a row and just infinite fusion rifle shots. But again, that's very heavily build crafting. But let's go ahead and move on to D tier. D tier, these weapons are marked by a disappointing feel, or they require too much of a niche scenario to be viable. They can be fun, but they will likely struggle or at least hold the player back in most higher level activities. I would argue most activities just in general. These are bland weapons, and we are going to start with Sturm, which is a kinetic hand cannon. Sturm comes with the perk Accomplice. Kills with this weapon fill the magazine of equipped energy weapons from reserves. So you get a kill with this gun, and if you have a shotgun, sniper, fusion rifle, hand cannon, sidearm, submachine gun, any weapon in your energy slot will be instantly refilled from its reserves, of course. Then his other perk, Storm and Stress, kills with Drang, reload this weapon, and overflow a bonus damage round into the magazine. The strengths. So first of all, it can hold a lot of bonus damage shots, and I believe the bonus damage shots are double damage. You can have up to 99 bullets in the magazine, 99 bullets in the magazine that deal double damage on top of the other like 11 rounds that you have, which sounds crazy, but it does require a certain playstyle, which we'll talk about in just a second. It does, of course, pair well with Drang. Drang is a legendary energy sidearm, and it literally goes hand in hand with Sturm. And the Catalyst adds some wonderful stats. The Catalyst adds tremendously good stats, which we'll look at in just a second. The weaknesses, though. There are better legendary options if you want a 120 hand cannon. You have things like Igneous Hammer. You have things like Exuviae. That's the new Stasis hand cannon from this season. These are 120s that are just like infinitely better than Sturm. Okay, and they can do more for the player, and it frees up your exotic slot. And if you don't use Sturm with Drang, this weapon is doing very little for you. Like, yes, it can refill the reserves of your equipped weapon, but there are mods on your boots that can do that as well, passively. This weapon is not good. I would not recommend buying this weapon unless you have nothing else to buy from that, from the Monument to Lost Light. Now, the Catalyst grants plus 20 range, plus 40 handling. Again, in PvP, this weapon can be pretty good, but it's a rough one. When Worm's notes here, this weapon is not good. I would not recommend purchasing this weapon unless you have nothing else to buy. Look at that. See, I know myself better than anybody. Moving on, we've got MIDA Multi-Tool, and this one hurts so much to put in the D tier because MIDA has always held like a really close place to my heart. Comes with MIDA Multi-Tool. This weapon boosts movement speed. It also has MIDA Radar. Radar stays active while aiming down sights. The strengths of this weapon, this is probably the best feeling weapon in Destiny 2 or Destiny 1's history. Like, I literally don't think I've ever felt a weapon that feels better than MIDA Multi-Tool because of its exotic perk. It substantially boosts movement speed. So it gives you plus 10 mobility, or it maxes out your mobility, but it also gives you a sprint speed modifier. So you can haul butt around the map with this thing. You can really move with this. You can have an increased slide. Like, when you're running around with the weapon, you almost can feel the weapon in your hand, and it feels like it has absolutely zero weight to it whatsoever. It feels really, really good. But outside of that, it offers nothing else. Absolutely nothing else. There's no damage. There's no subclass synergy. Like, you literally have this so that you can move faster. And that's it. And that's what breaks my heart. That's why I had to put it in D tier. Because again, like, as good as it feels to have equipped and be able to move around quickly, that's all it's doing. This is literally a placebo effect weapon. You know, you put it on because it feels good, and that's it. Catalyst offers no distractions. Aiming with this weapon for a short period of time reduces flinch. This is a PvP based catalyst, and I believe that you still have to get this from the competitive playlist. I could be wrong. It doesn't add a whole lot to the weapon because its MIDA already handles flinch perfectly fine. Another strength I forgot to put on MIDA here, its stats are amazing. Like, its handling is so high. So your aim down sight speed, your reload speed, everything about this weapon feels really, really good, but it just doesn't have anything else besides feeling good going for it. So let's move on to the next weapon. Truth. This is a void rocket launcher. Oh my god, and Truth is arguably one of the worst weapons in the game. Prototype True Seeker. This weapon's rockets have tracking. Lock onto targets when aiming down sights. Yes. Which is wild to me. Grenades and horseshoes, projectiles will detonate when they are within close proximity of their targets. This is an exotic perk, because this was a perk in Destiny 1 on legendaries, but this is the only weapon in Destiny 2 that has ever featured grenades and horseshoes. This makes it so that you don't have to hit your rocket. Your rocket just has to get within, I want to say, like 5 meters of an enemy, and it'll blow up and it'll kill that enemy, which is great in PvP. The strength of this weapon, it has a 3-round tube. That's very nice. So you have 3 rockets before you have to reload. Of course, the rockets don't have to hit the target and they will still explode. So you're not running the risk of, you know, shooting a Truth rocket and it whizzes by a Colossus's face just at the last second, because that Colossus took 2 steps to the right. No, like, it'll hit basically any target that you want to shoot it at. The weaknesses, though, this is literally just a tracking rocket launcher, and it doesn't have a catalyst, and that's the biggest weakness. And it's a tragedy. Did I have a note down here? I did. This weapon, it's just tracking. That's its exotic trait. It's such a disappointing weapon. This weapon excelled in Destiny 1, as its tracking was incredible. I don't know why they changed it so that it doesn't track like it did in D1. Sorry, let me move this down just a little tiny. There we go. Okay, sorry. There we go. Now we can see the D tier. This weapon literally in Destiny 1, there's a clip you can probably just look up, like, Destiny 1 Truth tracking on YouTube and watch. Like, there's a clip where somebody fires a rocket, the enemy moved out of the way, like they jumped in the air or something. The rocket literally circled all the way up, did a loop all the way in the air, came back down and smacked that Guardian. Like, the tracking was actually crazy in Destiny 1, and for some reason they took it out of Destiny 2, and it won't do that anymore. So yeah, Truth is a terrible weapon. Do not buy this weapon. Do not spin your exotic ciphers and stuff on this weapon. Let's move on to the next one. Symmetry. This is an ARC scout rifle, 260 round per minute scout rifle, so it's a fully automatic weapon. It comes with perk Revolution. This weapon fires in full auto. Again, that's just intrinsic to the frame. Hold your reload button, to swap to ARC Seeker mode. ARC Seekers track towards combatants that you target. This is really cool because basically it's changes its fire rate from 260 down to 150, but it shoots little balls that will track towards enemies, which I think is pretty cool. Has about the same tracking as something like Jötunn. Okay, so it's not crazy, but it will kind of curve itself so that it tries to hit targets. It also has the perk Dynamic Charge. Final blows and precision hits build up dynamic charge. Swapping to Arc Seeker mode increases damage and partially reloads the magazine based on the number of charges. So basically, you get final blows and precision hits to get stacks of dynamic charge. The more stacks of dynamic charge you have, the more damage that Arc Seeker mode will do, and the longer it will last. The strengths of this weapon: it has decent damage potential. You know, it's not the best damage potential. I didn't put on here that has high damage potential, but the Arc Seeker mode does give it better damage, and especially if you have full stacks of dynamic charge, like, you can smoke some enemies pretty quickly. The tracking rounds do make it easy to hit targets. That is only if you're in Revolution mode or Arc Seeker mode. But the weakness is the loop is very, very slow. You have to hit at least 20 precision shots, which I would say getting precision shots in certain scenarios is quicker than getting final blows. But once you get to 20, you can then change it, and it lasts for, I think, 10 seconds. Arc Seeker mode will last for 10 seconds. One of the things that I struggle with tremendously with this weapon, I actually used it not too long ago because we were doing an episode of exotic rig crafting with this weapon. It is very easy to forget to switch between fire modes or to get confused on which fire mode you're in. Like, I would run into situations where, like, oh, I'm like aiming down sights, ready to, you know, build stacks of dynamic charge, and then all of a sudden I'm firing the Arc Seeker. So then I switch back, and then I'm confused. It's a confusing weapon to have this active. I wish Bungie would add some sort of, you know, indication on the weapon's actual like model to give us an indication, or a more noticeable indication to tell us which fire mode we're in. That way, whenever I aim down sights, oh, I'm still in Arc Seeker mode, I can switch it real quick. But it does have a catalyst. The catalyst grants +10 handling, +10 reload speed, nice little boosts. It also increases the maximum number of dynamic charge stacks. Oh, I believe dynamic charge over here is what grants 15. I think this one can bring it up to 20. And then it also grants Eddy Current. Eddy Current temporarily increases reload speed and handling after sprinting or while amplified. This effect is improved while you're amplified. One of the things I forgot to put on the weaknesses here, this weapon does not have arc synergy, even though amplified, even though it will work nicely when amplified, it doesn't have arc synergy, and this is a missed opportunity. Like, they could have made the Arc Seekers blind targets or something like that, and that would have, if the Arc Seekers blinded targets, I would say this would probably move up to B tier, but it doesn't, and it's staying in D tier. Let's move on to the next one though. Devil's Ruin Solar Sidearm. And this is a unique weapon. Exotic perk, Close the Gap. Variable trigger, press and release to fire individual shots. Hold your fire button to charge up a high power, unstoppable champion stunning laser, strong against unstoppable champions. And then it also has Pyrogenesis, fully charging the laser, refills the magazine from reserves. So basically, this weapon is, you have to like click and hold you have to click and do the trigger like this every single time. Like, every time you want to shoot a bullet, you can't have the full auto feature turned on and have this work, because when you hold the trigger, it will charge the weapon and it will unleash a laser. Now, when you are shooting the weapon and you charge the laser, it will instantly refill it. So once the laser is firing, you're guaranteed to get, you know, the full magazine blast from the laser. And of course, it is strong against unstoppable champions, and that is one of its primary strengths. It has that anti-champion capability just built into it, which is nice. And it does have pretty high burst damage. That laser beam is no joke. It deals a lot of damage to enemies, not nearly as high as, again, something like Fourth Horseman or some of the other weapons, but it's still high damage. The weaknesses, though, it's a very slow weapon to use. Again, having to tap your trigger to, you know, just shoot it regularly is just so cumbersome. I don't like to feel that. And there are honestly better options. Like, you know, the damage output is nothing crazy. You could put on any number of exotics that will have higher burst damage. You know, we talked about some earlier in this video. And there's just better options for sidearms. In fact, there are better solar legendary sidearms, things like Drang, for example, or Heliocentric, that'll just be better. And this, of course, this weapon has no catalyst either. Oops, has no catalyst. So that's another downside of this weapon. Let's go ahead and move on to the next weapon, which is a Ruinous Effigy. And Ruinous Effigy is a void trace rifle with a perk Transmutation. There's going to be a lot to unpack with this, okay? But final blows with this weapon collapse victims into a void transmutation spheres. Evolutions. Okay. Oh, also backup, or actually evolution. Transmutation spheres you create can be picked up and wielded as weapons by you or allies. And then it has the details of the attacks and stuff you can do. So basically, you get a kill with a trace rifle, and the enemy turns into a ball, like a relic. Then you can go over and you can pick up that relic, and you can use your light attack to hit enemies. You can use your heavy attack, which will apply a suppressing heavy attack. So it will stagger unstoppable champions, which is nice. And then you can also block, and blocking, just like with a sword, will drain nearby enemies of their health. And it will also, if I'm not mistaken, it will grant that health to you. So you can literally like steal an enemy's health, and it'll also guard you. It does block a little bit of incoming damage. This is the definition of a fun exotic. Okay, this is the definition of an exotic that is incredibly fun to use. It does have that anti-champion capability, and it does have built-in health regeneration. But the weaknesses of this weapon, it's fun, but it's niche. Like, it's fun. It's not going to be doing well in-game activities and stuff. Like, I'm sure there's somebody out there who could make it work in a Grandmaster Nightfall, but there's just better options all around for that stuff. But it also is a close quarter combat weapon. If you're just using it as a trace rifle, just use something else besides this weapon. Like, if you're just going to use it as a trace rifle, use Prometheus Lens, use Cold Heart, use something else. Because the whole point of this weapon is to make those transmutation spheres and use those transmutation spheres. But of course, in order to get to those transmutation spheres, you have to get close up to the enemies, which is really risky in high level content. It does have a catalyst. The catalyst states that the weapon will deal increased damage against targets damaged via transmutation spheres. I think the damage boost is 20%. It'll deal 20% more damage. So you could go up and like do a suppressing heavy attack and, you know, stun a unstoppable champion. And then you go in here with a, you know, with your trace rifle, deal 20% more damage. It could be good, but catalyst isn't necessary by any means. This is a very fun weapon, but it's still going in D tier. It can be fun and be bad at the same time. Let's move on to the next one. We have Lorentz Driver. This is a special ammo void linear fusion rifle, and this is the it's special ammo, which is very, very unique. Has the perk Lagrangian Sight. This weapon marks targets with an automated targeting system. Final blows on marked targets generate a telemetry pattern. Collecting 3 telemetry patterns without dying grants this weapon bonus damage for a long duration. That duration is 30 seconds. A precision final blow with this weapon creates an implosion that pulls in nearby targets and damages them with an additional detonation. Strengths. This weapon does have high ad clear potential. Through that EM anomaly, if you get a precision kill, it sucks enemies in, right? It just pull them in, and it will explode and damage or potentially kill those enemies. It also, like we said, it has a very long damage buff, and the damage buff I think is 50%, which is pretty high for 30 seconds. That is crazy. But let's talk about the weaknesses. The buildup is slow, okay? And randomness does play a big role in the weapon. So Lagrangian Sight. What it says here is you have to collect these 3 telemetry patterns. It will also mark targets. The target marking is completely random. Okay, you will, like, as you're in an activity, you'll see an X that'll mark an enemy. When you kill that enemy, it will drop one of those little thing, just a little thing that floats on the ground, a little telemetry pattern that you can go and pick up. Sometimes what will happen is you'll see that enemy and your teammate will kill that enemy. If your teammate kills that marked enemy, you do not get the telemetry pattern. Okay, sometimes that enemy will be a champion. Again, it takes a long time to bring down a champion, so you're not getting, and maybe you're not the one that finishes the champion. Maybe your teammate runs up at the last second and actually does a finisher on the champion and kills the champion. You will not get that telemetry pattern. That's part of the randomness. Like, if there's a way to select which targets you wanted to track, this would be much higher on the list. I think it would be much higher up there. But because it's random, like, there's every opportunity that your teammate kills the enemy that is marked. There's every opportunity that that the enemy spawns behind you and you don't even see where they are, and your teammate kills them before you ever even know they spawned. There's just a lot of randomness. And of course the buildup is slow too. Like, it takes a little bit of time before those targets are marked. It'll mark a target, you kill that target, pick up its telemetry, then it takes like 8 seconds or so to mark another target, and then you kill that one, so on and so forth. But yeah, it does have a catalyst too. Lorentz Driver will gain an enhanced radar. It's similar to a Echo of Dilation radar, so your radar is basically doubled in its performance. Additionally, while this weapon has 3 telemetry patterns, EM anomaly detonations no longer require a precision final blow. This catalyst is not a must, but I would strongly recommend it, because once you get that damage boost going, that Lagrangian Sight going, you just have to hit a body shot. and it will cause that implosion and it will suck enemies in, and it is a ton of fun. And especially like if you're doing stuff solo and you're guaranteed to get those kills against, you know, those marked targets, this is a very fun weapon, and I see it having really good potential. But right now I think it's in D tier. It has too much randomness, especially in team play, which again, Destiny 2 is 90% team play. It has too much randomness to really be viable. Again, if Bungie gave us a way to mark targets, like custom mark targets, Bungie, maybe somebody's listening, that would help tremendously. But let's move on to the next weapon, which is Trespasser. This is an arc sidearm. It's a 3-round burst arc sidearm. Comes with the perk Unrepentant. Reloading after defeating a target causes the next burst to be a longer, more powerful super burst. Be the danger. Final blows with Unrepentant super burst automatically reload your weapon and provide another Unrepentant super burst. So the loop of this weapon, you get a kill, and then you reload, and then it gives you a 10-second opportunity to shoot a target. Now the next shot that comes out of your weapon, whether you hit a target or not, will be that it's a 6-round burst that deals increased damage. I'm not sure how much increased damage, but I know it's a pretty substantial amount of increased damage. Then if you get a kill with that burst, it will automatically reload and automatically refresh Unrepentant. So you can chain this over and over and over again. Very easy to chain kills. Okay, and that's one of the strong suits of it. It is easy to chain those kills. It has that automatic reload, and it's a good feeling weapon. Like, it feels good to use. Like, it's got, you know, pretty decent stats and stuff like that. Some of the things that are missing from it, though, it doesn't have arc synergy. I think with a lot of arc, like, I think there's a lot of weapons that are missing arc synergy that should have arc synergy. This is one of those weapons. Also, missing the super burst is costly. If you miss your super burst, or if you don't get a kill with a super burst, it's going to be a slow reload, and it's just, you have to be able to hit your shots. If you don't, you're going to be missing out. Now, it does have a catalyst. The catalyst gives it tunnel vision reloading after defeating a target, greatly increase the target acquisition aimed down sight speed for a short duration. This, if I'm not mistaken, this does proc off of Be the Danger. So if you are you know, getting a kill with Unrepentance, it will refresh tunnel vision as well without actually having to physically do the reload, which is a nice bonus to this weapon. But still, I couldn't put it any higher than D tier, because it's not a weapon that is like good in PvP. It might feel good, but does not perform all that great. Like, there are legendary weapons that will do the same thing. That's why I say it needs some arc synergy. But let's move on to the next one, which is Delicate Tomb. I hate this weapon. I'm going to just precurse it by saying that. Now, I'm going to be unbiased about it. It's bad for, I don't just hate it because I hate it. I hate it because of a specific reason, which we're going to talk about. Trader's Vessel fires a wide horizontal spread when fired, when shot from the hip. Final blows with this weapon have a chance to generate ionic traces. Powerful foes and opposing guardians always generate ionic traces. Then it has Tempest Cascade. Collecting an ionic trace overcharges this weapon's next shot, jolting targets on hit. Oh boy. This weapon it has two different fire patterns. When you're aiming down sights, it'll have a vertical, like a normal fusion rifle bolt pattern, but when you hit fire, it'll shoot that horizontal spread. That horizontal spread is awful, okay? Because how many times are you like shooting, it's like imagine shooting a shotgun and the spread is horizontal, okay? Is that going to do anything for you? Absolutely not. And this is the same way here. Now, some of the strengths of it does have arc synergy. It has ionic traces, and it can jolt targets, which is a really, really nice thing. I don't want to deny that. It does have decent ad clear capability because of that jolt. Because the what's it called? The horizontal line. Like, if you get a group of ads coming at you, that horizontal line can be better than a vertical line or a vertical spread. And it also does auto reload with the catalyst, which we'll talk about the catalyst here in just a second. The weaknesses, though, it's got a horizontal spread. Outside of that niche situation where, that I said, where you have a group of enemies coming at you, horizontal spread is absolutely atrocious. There is one other horizontal spread fusion rifle in the game. It's an aggressive fusion rifle, Coriolis Force. I have never seen anybody use that weapon. Why? Because it's not good. Now, also, another thing that really holds this weapon back is the fact that it only has a chance to generate ionic traces. Okay, not every kill is going to give you an ionic trace. And honestly, for an exotic, it should be every kill. Especially for an exotic special weapon, it should be every single kill. It does have a catalyst. The catalyst, of course, is collecting an ionic trace partially refills the magazine from reserves. Again, I think the catalyst could be better. You could, instead of doing it from reserves, it just reloads the magazine. But this weapon's just not good. I would say this weapon is probably like the weapon that would deserve to be at the bottom. Like, again, D tier weapons, just like with A tier, S tier, B tier, C tier, these aren't any particular order, but this one should have been at the very bottom. It would be at the very bottom for me. Moving on to the next weapon, though, we have the Manticore. This is a void submachine gun. It looks very cool, too, by the way. Has the perks Soaring Fang. Dealing damage while grounded charges anti-grav repulsors. Dealing damage while airborne extends anti-grav repulsors. Okay, so anti-grav repulsors, it doesn't explain what it is in the actual perk here, but basically, when you're dealing damage, you're building up a bar on the side of your screen. Now, when you have any charge to that bar at all, when you jump up in the air and you start dealing damage while in the air, it will hold you in the air. Okay, so you jump up, you get a couple kills on the ground, charge that bar up, you jump up in the air and you start shooting at targets. The second that first bullet hits, you're going to start floating. Okay, and you're going to literally just stay there. And you can move left and right and forward, backwards, but you can't go down and you can't go up, which is a really jarring experience, especially if you have been playing Destiny for a little bit and you've never used something like this. It is very weird to float above the battlefield. It can be a really fun playstyle. We'll talk about that in just a second. But let's finish reading what it does. When you hold your reload button, it will actually disengage anti-grav repulsor, so you'll drop to the ground immediately. And then Swooping Talons. Dealing damage while airborne increases this weapon's damage outputs. So yeah, while you're in the air and you're shooting it, it will give it, I want to say like 15% bonus damage. Not a lot, but still nice. Still encourages the aerial play. The strengths. It is a fun and unique playstyle. Like I said, there's not really anything else that can give you quite the same experience that you have with this weapon. And yes, you could say, oh, what about Wings of Sacred Dawn? Nothing feels like this weapon does. Okay, and it is a weird feeling. It also will grant an overshield with a catalyst, and it does have void synergy because of that overshield. The weaknesses, though, this is a super niche playstyle. Okay, like playing in the air is a super niche playstyle that most players don't do because it's very risky to play in the air. Aerial fighting is counterintuitive to submachine guns as well. Naturally, when you're in the air, you're probably at a decent distance away from enemies. Like the most you could probably do is like hover right over the battlefield, like hover right over the enemy's head so they can't melee you. They have difficulty tracking you, which we'll talk about the catalyst here in just a second because that's one of the things it does. But aerial fighting just feels counterintuitive to a submachine gun. I feel like if this was an auto rifle, 100%, it would be much better. Much better at what it does, but it's too risky to play in the air, especially in content where you have like the grounded modifier where you have to be on the ground, otherwise you take twice as much damage. It's too risky. That's why I put it in D tier. Now the catalyst, while you're airborne, sustained damage and final blows with this weapon to difficult combatants grant a void overshield. It also reduces combatant accuracy and returns ammo to the magazine. So this is cool because one of the things about this catalyst is when you're floating in the air and and you're shooting stuff, enemies they just lose their ability to hit targets, to hit you as a target. Like you'll have a Colossus like beaming you and then you activate this and just start floating out of the way and he just continues to shoot at the same spot. Like he doesn't have any tracking on you whatsoever. So it's pretty good. The catalyst, I would say, is a must-have to make this weapon viable for what it wants you to do, which is play in the air. And I didn't put that under the weaknesses, but yeah, the catalyst is a must-have to make this weapon viable. But Manticore is just a strange weapon all around. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the next weapon. Exdirus. Okay, and I believe this is the last one that we have. So Exdirus is an arc grenade launcher, and Exdirus is a very unique weapon. Comes with a perk, Corrupted Nucleosynthesis. This weapon enrages when dealing or taking sustained damage, gaining increased rate of fire while enraged. It also has the perk Loyal Moths. Final blows and rapid direct hits with this weapon create a loyal moth. The moth will seek out nearby targets and detonates, damaging and blinding them. It also has another unique exotic perk, it's the magazine perk, Nucleosynthetic Magazine. This magazine continuously draws ammo from reserves. The magazine also enables firing arc projectiles that detonate on impact. The strengths of this weapon: you will never have to reload it. That is Nucleosynthetic Magazine working for you. Never have to reload it, which is an awesome feature. It does have arc synergy because it can blind enemies and stuff like that. And it does have a very unique fun factor. However, it's a niche weapon. This is basically a Hive Boomer Knight's weapon. You can fulfill the role of becoming a boomer, a Hive Boomer, and that's pretty much it. I guess you have to be ammo conscious because this is a special weapon. You can burn. It's a special weapon that's fully fully automatic, and you don't have to reload it. So you can burn through ammo really fast with this weapon. So you have to be really ammo conscious. And then the mods that you spawn with loyal mods are on a bit of a cooldown that can be kind of obnoxious. It's 3 seconds. It used to be 4 seconds. It brought down to 3 seconds, but it's still just not really. Like it feels weird to use. Like it's a weapon that it almost wants you to use it like a primary, but you can't because it's still a special weapon. It does have a catalyst as well. The weapon enrages faster while amplified. Final blows with this weapon also make you amplified. So again, this is kind of where that arc synergy is coming in at. You know, it'll get you amplified on multi kills, which is pretty good. It's got that blinding effect. It is a fun weapon. Like this is a weapon that if you're just looking for something to have fun with, this is 100% a weapon I would recommend you buy for the fun factor. But don't expect to take this in Grandmaster content or in any high level content at all and do well with it. Like this is a very niche weapon. Fun but niche. And with that being said, hopefully this presentation has given you insight into what weapons you might want to buy from the Monuments to Lost Lights. Like I said, my slideshow here, this is all based on personal opinion, and there is no doubt in my mind that I probably missed some aspect of some weapons. And if you are aware of those, just go in the comments and tell me and let people know, you know, whatever it is that I missed. I don't mind when y'all do that, but like I said, hopefully this helps you pick which weapons you want to buy in the future. And yeah, with that being said, I will see y'all in the next one, guys. Bye for now.